Good morning. Bonjour. Buenos días a todos. Welcome to the second full day of the Victoria Forum. We seem to have dwindled somewhat in numbers. I'm sure more people will be filling in some of these empty spaces over the course of the day. But right now, we want to get us started in a good way with a territorial welcome from Elder Terry Barnhart of the Songhees First Nations. Please welcome Elder Terry to the stage.
Good morning. Great to see you all here this morning. Ice Squeecho, as the Dutchy or Terry. My late mother was Janet Dick. Skip Dick and Butch Dick are my maternal uncles who I not only love and admire, but have inspired me to start this journey that I am on. To all the other relations that I see, I'd like to say Equantus Kunalahela. On behalf of my family and myself, we'd like to welcome each and every one of you here. Welcome to Victoria. Welcome to UVic. Welcome to the lands of Lekwungen people, lands of smoke herring. We are on the lands of the Lekwungen people. We are a joint nation of Songhees and Esquimalt. We were one before treaties and borders. At this time, I would like to thank Zoe and everyone here at UVic for allowing this time to follow cultural protocols on our lands. I am new at finding my voice, but I know this work needs to be done. Asiyam Nachalacha, Asadachi or Terry, Cheflasan at Lekwungen, Heichka Kwansla Atla, Heichka Kwansla Tejo at Lanukat Lekwungen, Heichka Siyam. Thank you for having me here this morning and enjoy your conference.
Thank you very much, Elder Terry. And let me correct my first mistake of the day, which was that I didn't introduce myself. Stephen Huddard with the forum team, and I'm going to be your moderator this morning. We have quite a bit of ground to cover. It's going to be a big day. Lots of work has been done and is being done in the background, so we'll keep moving things forward. It's now my distinct pleasure to introduce Elder Shirley Alphonse, who is going to conduct an opening prayer for us to put us into the right place for taking on the work that we're doing and moving forward together. Just a few words of introduction. Elder Shirley is from the Cowichan First Nation, though she lives in Sooke. For a number of years, she was the elder who opened Parliament when Premier John Horgan of Sooke was our premier. She is a recipient of an honorary doctorate from Royal Roads University and is also a recipient of the King's Coronation Medal. Would you please join me in welcoming Elder Shirley to the stage?
Good morning, everyone. Siyam Mastima. I just have a couple of things to share before I share my prayer with you. I would like to mention how grateful I am to Dr. Elder Butch Dick for sharing the Zinqua song with you yesterday. The Zinqua opera was composed by Abel Joe and Mr. Morrison, who was a music teacher at our Indian day school called St. Catherine's. So along with Mr. Morrison, Abel Joe composed the Zinqua opera, and that song was from the opera. Also, the Cowichan prayer song, which most of you hear, was composed also by Abel Joe and my grandfather, Alphonse George. I just wanted to share that little bit of information. And also, we are very grateful to Ray Peters, who carried on the songs. and it is still alive today. I also am an elder to Videa organization for youth who are recruited across Canada, Indigenous youth who go to Africa to work and learn and become leaders with the youth in Africa. Also, they have programs for social justice, climate action, and the environment, social inclusion. Lynn Thornton is a director who's been there for 15 years, and I've been the elder for 13 years. And I just wanted to share that because I think they do wonderful and great work, the youth across Canada. Okay. And this morning, I'd like to share the prayer that I had written for our late premier in the legislature for one of the times I was there. I was elder to John. Creator, Great Spirit, we thank you for this day and for each one of you here, from the youngest to the oldest. We thank you for all the blessings of today. Sacred Mother Earth, all that you are, all that you hold for us as living beings upon your earth, around your earth. We say with deepest gratitude, Haichka, for majestic trees, the standing people, the sweet scented flowers, the medicine plants, the shrubs. We say with deepest gratitude, Haichka, for the strong protective mountains, the stone people, for the rolling hills of green grass. We say with deepest gratitude, Haichka, for the life-giving oceans, so deep, so beautiful, for all pebble beaches, for the clear, sparkling waters of streams, rippling, babbling brooks, the rivers of crystal waterfalls, calming, serene lakes. We say with deepest gratitude, Haichka, for the minerals, the metals, the stones. We say with deepest gratitude, Haichka, for the four-legged, the winged ones, for the water dwellers, insects, creatures of the land, the sea, the sky. We say with deepest gratitude, Haichka, for Grandmother Moon, serene and calm, Grandfather Sun, energizing warmth, Brother Stars, Sister Star, sparkling light, Father Sky, clear and blue, Mother Earth, your beauty and bounty. We say with deepest gratitude, Haichka, for refreshing rains and thunder beams, for cleansing winds of the four directions, for purifying snow, for the four seasons. We say with deepest gratitude, Haichka, Creator, Great Spirit, thank you with deepest gratitude. The footprints Mother Earth holds of our ancestors of the four nations of yellow, black, red, and white. Once here, now guiding us with sacred teachings to carry on in a good way of respect, kindness, care, generosity, compassion. For the sake of all children all over the world, that they may live in a world of peace and harmony. Children who will come behind us to the seventh generation. And we say thank you to our beautiful Mother Earth, who is happy to look after us. Hi, Lucia.
Thank you so much, Elder Shirley, for those welcoming words, those ways into grounding ourselves in this time, in this moment, in this place, with gratitude, with an understanding that we stand at such an important moment in human history, with generations before us, whose legacy we have, both in terms of the gifts that they have provided us, the work that they did in their lives, we build on today, and also some of the legacy of harm that is ours to continue to resolve through the reconciliation process and in other spheres, as we think about repairing the earth through regenerative economics, which is the area that I'm responsible for at the forum. But before we continue with our next panel, I'd just like to say a few more words about the forum and why this is important, what we're trying to do here. It's a hybrid organization, as you've heard, formed out of a partnership between the university and the Senate of Canada. Could I ask by show of hands, are there any senators present with us yet this morning? Yeah, would you mind standing, please, so that we can acknowledge this relationship? I think that's Senator Osler. Thank you. Thank you so much. And out of this core relationship, we've expanded the sectoral representatives, the representation here at the forum into other areas of the public sector, provincially, municipally, and we need to do more in this regard. We have some private sector leaders here. We had Francis Edwards here from HP Canada on the opening panel yesterday, talking about how important it is to involve this sector in the work that we're doing, and the power of procurement and of supply chain dynamics that spread messages that increase awareness, demand, and advance the job, the huge task we have before us. The other point I'd like to highlight from yesterday's morning session was the lessons learned report. I encourage everybody to look at that report. Out of years, since 1998 till now, the Auditor General's report has been fastidious, looking at how we are doing on advancing specific goals. The lessons learned are 6 overall recommendations to all of us on how to move forward on a different and better trajectory. So I really want to encourage people to go back and take a look at that. Speaking of going back and taking a look, we will be publishing the transcripts of sessions. Within a week, you'll be able to access information online. And although we hope it's pretty good, it's been produced by an AI software, so it may be imperfect. But the point I want to make is that we're now at a time when we have to both move forward fast and slow. You all remember the book Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. There's some things now that need to move quickly because we don't have a lot of time. As our good friend Courtney Howard said on the health panel yesterday, led by my mentor, Peter Singer, by the way, he accused me of saying he was my mentee, but in fact, the reverse is at least as true as that. So, but Courtney's point was, if we want to work on mitigation, and we have a narrowing window in which to do so. So thinking fast and slow and acting fast and slow. Slow at the scale of generations and of restoring generational equity and understanding, collaboration. I'd highlight the workshop later today called Rewiring for Reality, led by Gio Andreotti de Machado, which is about a deeper dive into intergenerational understanding in the context of complexity. I would be remiss in not mentioning as well the thanks that we owe to so many people here. I'll very quickly acknowledge my colleagues, our partners, But I want to highlight the families that you have left behind, the people who couldn't be here, but who are at home tending the fires, making sure that in the case of Vinod Rajasekaran, that his daughter gets to school on her first day of school accompanied. Vinod had to really make a big choice here, and we're grateful for him for coming, making the one that was enabled him to be here with us yesterday and not on his daughter's first day of school. The co-producers, all of the session producers, an enormous amount of volunteer work has gone into that. And of course, the volunteers who are producing this event with us today. Thank you all. I do have to say that in the field of innovation, we are making mistakes all the time and learning from them and moving forward. And I have to quickly cite two mistakes that are enabling us to move forward in a better way. The first was that in planning the plenary sessions for this forum, we had originally intended to hold a youth plenary. After all, that's who is the most important generation. They're inheriting everything that we have done and not done. We need to create more space for youth at the forum. However, having set up that part of the program, we learned that due to a miscommunication, a misunderstanding, another plenary was being developed with a global set of speakers. You're about to meet them, and we had to make room for them in the plenary session. It was politically something very important. We just had to do it. So we regret having had to move the youth session to this afternoon. We encourage you to attend it. It's listed here in your program. And please, Youth on the Front Lines, Shaping Just and Sustainable Futures at 3:15 p.m. And we have youth participation in other parts of the program as well, including later this morning. But that being said, we have a commitment going forward to make more room for youth participation and youth leadership here at the forum. The second mistake that I want to acknowledge and have us learn from is that last night we had planned to have a very special performance by two remarkable musicians. And you have to permit me a moment to just tell you the story of how this came about. David Vest, a blues piano player, is 81 years old, born in Alabama, lives in Victoria, but has played with many of the greats over the years, over the course of his career, and is a 6-time Maple Blues Award National Blues Pianist of the Year. He was there ready to play, but we didn't have a sound system that would enable him to be heard over the crowd that showed up. We've got many more people, although not this morning. There's over 100 more people than we were anticipating who registered in the last day. And so it put pressure on a lot of our systems. Accompanying David is a remarkable young man named Daniel Morel. Daniel's from Montreal, and he's given me permission to share something of his story. He was a child who was being abused at home and was on a lonely walk, thinking dark thoughts, very dark thoughts, and walking across a bridge in the snow, spotted something on the ground in front of him and picked it up, and it was a harmonica. Whether that was an angel that put that harmonica in front of David at that critical moment, don't know, won't speculate, but David has been carrying that harmonica and expanding his repertoire and capacity around that through 10 years of being homeless in Canada. He's been a street musician, a busker, now lives in Victoria and happily, securely housed. But he has a very, very interesting story of how he got here, as I'm sure all of you do. We met, my wife and I met and heard David and Daniel at TEDx Victoria earlier this year. And I just thought we were so struck by their work, their stories, their beautiful music, along with that of Zoe Slusar, the rap artist hip hop artist, I should say, who opened our session at the Songhees Wellness Center. And I had the occasion to speak with a friend from Calgary who's in the arts field, has run arts festivals and theater companies and so on. And I asked him the question that I'll leave with you as well, which is, what does a cultural complement of the Victoria Forum look like? How might we structure programming that elevates our spirits, that connects us through the arts, that challenge us with new framings and a sense of new possibilities and a sense of moving forward together. And I had already told my friend about the encounter at TEDx Victoria with these musicians. And he said, well, why don't you just start there? And I had to say, well, we don't have a budget. We're struggling to get this thing off the ground, and there just isn't a budget for that. And being a thoughtful and generous person, he said, I think you should just go ahead and see if you could get those people on the program. I said, I can make sure that that's taken care of. I don't know if, Colin, are you here? Yes, Colin Jackson. And his partner, Arlene Strong. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here. And we look forward to continuing that conversation. So with that in view, we've managed to reschedule that performance to today. And it was David Vest's suggestion. He said, you know, why don't you just put us on stage at the university? I played there and it just seemed like a natural place to do this. It wasn't an easy thing to do, to find a place in this schedule to do that, given how packed an agenda it is. What we're doing is they're going to perform after the closing session. So there's Joe Clark, Adele Guituni, Rowan Gentleman Sylvester, and by the way, Satsan won't be here, the Indigenous leader of the Canadian Centre for First Nations Governance. He is being replaced by the executive director of that organization. I don't have his name to hand, but it's going to be a very interesting reflection on the session overall. And it will be followed immediately afterwards by a performance by David and Daniel. So please, if you can, stay around for that. That'll be at 7 to 7:30. Okay, thank you. So with all of that, I'd like to now introduce an extraordinary panel that I'm very pleased to see coming to the forum. And to get us underway, I'd like to introduce John Richardson, the founder and CEO of Othello Decisions, the regularly voted #1 or #2 best online decision-making, democratic decision-making toolkit in the world. He has come a long way from learning, being inspired back in the days of Occupy Wall Street. But as a lawyer, founder of Pivot Legal Society, he's got an extraordinary story himself, but I won't take up more time here. I'd like to invite John to invite his panel to join us and get us underway. Please join us in welcoming John and the panel. Thank you.
I would like to, introduce my wonderful panelists and also thank the organizers of the forum for inviting us. I think it's an amazing opportunity to bring digital democracy to the front. So we will be joined by video, and in a moment that will be queued up by Audrey Tang, who's Taiwan's first digital minister and an internationally recognized pioneer and leader in digital democracy and civic technology. So we will hear from Audrey in a moment. I'd also like to welcome Andre Cote. At my far left is a policy strategist at Toronto Metropolitan University's Dias think tank and a former senior advisor to Ontario's Deputy Premier with deep expertise in education technology and digital government. Next to Andre is Liz Berry. Liz is the executive director of MetaGov and a pioneering facilitator of listening at scale, who has collaborated across many group movements around the world to build democratic systems and tools. On my left is Lisa Scherch, who is a professor in the practice of peace building at the University of Notre Dame, with over 30 years in conflict resolution and peace infrastructure design using deliberative technology. And we will also be joined by video, live video by Jeff Marino, who's the head of the State of California's Office of Data and Innovation, where he leads the team responsible for the groundbreaking Engage California Deliberative Democracy Initiative. So we'll begin with the video welcome by Audrey Tang, Taiwan's first digital minister.
Good local time. I'm Audrey Tang, Taiwan's Cyber Ambassador, first digital minister, and architect of the Taiwan model of digital democracy. It is a tremendous honor and a privilege to participate in the prestigious and impactful Victoria Forum. We are gathering at a time when realizing the UN Sustainable Development Goals is proving more challenging than ever before, and many feel a deep anxiety about the state of democracy. We see polarization intensifying, and the digital tools we use often seem to exacerbate these divides. But amid the sea of adversity is Taiwan, an island of resilience upon which the promise of new possibilities and a sense of calm empowerment rule okay. I will share elements of my vision and approaches that are helping us free the future on the front line of democracy together. We tend to think of democratic infrastructure as a kind of bedrock, stable, solid, but also slow to change. And we often view conflict as a destructive force threatening this stability. But what if we change our perspective? What if we view infrastructure not as bedrock, but as a way to navigate change in an anti-fragile way? And what if we see conflict, those intergenerational or urban-rural divides, not as threat, but as fuel for cooperation? The challenge is that many platforms, what I call antisocial networks, are designed to maximize engagement through enragement. They transform that energy into volcanic moments. So what we need is a way to depower our tectonic plates and empower civic care. In Taiwan, an island formed by 4 million years of plate moving against plate, we focus on building bridging systems. In conducting large-scale civic deliberation, we deploy tools like Polis, where there is no reply button. Attacks on others are impossible. Instead, the algorithm amplifies not the most divisive voices, but a statement that successfully bridge the divide, those earning support from otherwise opposed groups. This turns polarization into plurality or collaborative diversity. It turns a volcanic explosion back into safe, positive, and productive energy. So where does AI fit in the scheme of things? When discussing AI, people often talk about hitting the brakes in fear or pressing the accelerator to the floor. Both views miss the most crucial component, the steering wheel. The landscape is shifting dramatically toward democratic AI. These are open source, decentralized, and crucially, locally aligned models. And this is a game changer. It means any community, a city in British Columbia, a US state like California, or a central government ministry in Taiwan can take these open models and tune them to unique definitions of fairness, accountability, and very affordably. We're building AI not to replace human judgment, but to augment our collective wisdom. The ambition must be to institutionalize this spirit. Democracy can be fast, fair, and fun. We do not have to choose. As the late, great Canadian Leonard Cohen wrote, there is a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. Let us use these tools as well as the power of co-creation, innovation, and openness to let the light in. Thank you for the kind and generous attention. May we have a successful and value-added Victoria Forum. Live long and prosper.
So following Audrey, we'll dial in Jeffrey Marino, who's the head of the Office of Data and Innovation for the state of California. And each one of the panelists is going to talk a little bit about themselves and their work, and also about what they see as the core challenge or problem facing democracy right now in their kind of experience and motivation. So we'll start with Jeffrey Marino. Can we bring him on camera?
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. It's an honor to share our perspective from the state of California and the Office of Data and Innovation. A little bit about my background. Prior to joining the Call to Public Service, I worked in the startup and technology space here in California, working for startups in the real estate technology and job recruitment technology space. There, I specialized in gathering the big data that those platforms were able to amass in order to develop insights that would empower folks in that space, both in the housing market as well as in our job market and the small business community, to make data-driven decisions and to better empower them to be successful. And so I joined State Service during the pandemic here in California. And I was asked to volunteer to help with developing some of those data insights as it related to the policy actions that we were taking at that time. I'm sure as many of you all recall, we were implementing policies, not just in California, but across the world in terms of business closures and reopenings based upon case rates, et cetera. We were rich in public health information and data, but quite poor at that time in terms of data that would inform whether or not those policy decisions and how those policy decisions were affecting Californians, including our economy, and really our mental health and well-being. And so I was called to service to work on that initiative. And it was at that time that I was introduced to the Office of Data and Innovation. The Office of Data and Innovation had just been established in 2019, just before the pandemic. It was part of Governor Newsom's first budget. And the Office of Data and Innovation was established in order to partner with other state departments to help improve service delivery through human-centered design, technology, and data. And so we have a very specialized team here at ODI that's unlike really any other department within California state government, with expertise in design, data science, and engineering. And so we also, in terms of fulfilling our mission to improve service delivery for Californians, we hold at the very center the principle that it must be human-centered. We can't help to improve service delivery unless we can create a feedback loop of communication and understanding with those that we serve. And so that has been our main focus since being established in 2019, which is why it makes sense for ODI to take on the initiative of bringing the first digital deliberative democracy platform to the state of California. We kicked off that work just about 1 year ago and did so in partnership with John, and we're using the Othello platform. And we've done so with, we think, some degree of success at this point, though, of course, we are still learning a ton. We set out to use the platform on a completely different use case. But as we were about to launch, the wildfires that ravaged Los Angeles County occurred, and we pivoted. And we were asked by our governor and the administration for an all hands on deck, all of government approach to supporting Angelenos to have a community-led recovery in Los Angeles. And so we pivoted the Engaged California team to focus on enabling that dialogue, that deliberation, and ultimately creating what we're now developing as we speak, a report that will be published on our website, engaged.ca.gov, a report that outlines the findings of that conversation that not only will drive government action, but will also act as a transparency and accountability tool for the people to hold their government accountable. And then I'll close just here on my brief intro by noting some of the challenges, really the core challenge that I see facing democracy in America and democracy in California right now. And it really comes down to one word for me, and that is trust. And trust is really like an electrical circuit. It doesn't work unless it's constantly going both ways, both from government to Californians, and then continuously back and forth. If that circuit is broken, the trust is broken. And the key that we need to follow here is that not only do we need to improve the way that we deliver services to build that trust for our residents and the people that we serve, but we also have to, government needs to trust its people in kind. and needs to demonstrate that we also hold that trust in the people that we serve to make those decisions that will end up driving and empowering and improving their lives. So thank you very much for having me here. I'm very much looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Thank you, Jeffrey. And now we'll kind of hear from each of the panelists on stage, talking about themselves and giving kind of a similar insight into democracy. Andre, we'll start with you.
Sure, thank you. So hi, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Thrilled to be here. Thanks so much for having me at the forum and with this this august group on this panel. So I'm Andre Cote. A bit about my background. I worked in government, in the Ontario government, in the public service, as well as in politics. I was an advisor to a minister of Treasury Board and of higher education and workforce back in the day. And key amongst that, we stood up Ontario's digital service strategy. So I had a lot of empathy for the minister, the BC minister here yesterday, who's taking on that challenge. And it was also during the era of open government. Does anyone remember that back in the day? Feels like, you know, quite a long time ago, I think, from our, you know, our political context today. But so that's a little bit about where I've come from. Today, I am the head of a think tank at Toronto Metropolitan University called The Dais. Yesterday, I introduced this to someone and they said, is it called the Badaeus? And I said, uh-oh, I better talk to our communications team. We might have a challenge there. But no, so the dais is the raised platform. And so the symbol there is, it's a place for raising people and for raising ideas. That's kind of our mission. We work in three sort of thematic areas around innovation and tech policy, around education and skills, education and workforce, and around democracy. And ideally, we're doing work at the intersection of those things. And just to get some examples on the democracy front, we work with OCAD University and some other partners in putting on what I think is Canada's biggest democracy summit in kind of in the April timeframe called Democracy Exchange. We have kind of a year-round speaker series called Democracy Forum, which we're kicking off next month. We have Canada's new AI minister coming, so hopefully we'll put some tough questions to him. And we also connected on the digital side. We run Canada's longest-standing survey of online harms on social media platforms that looks at how Canadians are using social media platforms, how they're accessing news and their sort of information ecosystem. And then the harms they're experiencing on those platforms, and ultimately what they believe policymakers should do about this. And so I could maybe come back there. And then finally, we're launching a really neat initiative this year, which maybe I'll leave out there as a teaser because I want to come back to it in our conversation. So thanks, John.
And any thoughts about the challenges facing democracy? Want to weigh in on that? Oh, sorry, did I miss that?
Do you want to jump right to the challenges?
Yeah, just briefly touch on it, and then we'll kind of continue to the next speaker.
Okay, well, I'll try and go quick because I know we have limited time here, so we'll try and go quickly. But I would say, so I'm not the only Canadian amongst the speakers, but maybe I'll try and bring the sort of Canadian perspective because I know you're sort of working out of the U.S. The way I would put it is, I think that we talk a lot about the symptoms of call it democratic decay. So we talk about declining voter turnout. We talk about some of the polarization, the mis and disinformation, the pollution of the information ecosystem driven by social media and other things. We talk a little bit about how it's an increasingly inhospitable place to be an elected official, with just some of the abuse that they take. But my view would be these things are primarily the symptoms, and what we are not confronting is basically the broader neglect, maybe the broader decline of our democratic institutions. And so think more broadly about our electoral systems. This is one area where we do talk a little bit more. But I mean, we basically have systems where, for many of us, our votes, we're encouraged to vote, but our votes mean relatively little given the way that our electoral systems work. and we get governments that are not as representative as they should be of us and our perspectives. We can talk about the functioning of our sort of executive and cabinet-driven sort of governance models between election cycles, which have been increasingly centralized in recent generations, with the result of really concentrating power in the offices of the prime ministers, the premiers, party leaders, all these issues. And so what that does is that takes away power from our elected representatives and from us as the people, from civil society, et cetera. I think another one we're very concerned with is the state of our public administration, our public service. I think a challenge that we've seen is that they have not adapted, they have not modernized. And so, Jeffrey talked about trust. I think citizens are feeling right now that we're not necessarily even trusting our governments to be able to deliver basic services to the way that they should. And so, and I think what's happening south of the border, which I'm sure we will talk about, in a way, it's allowed us to be a little bit complacent because we've said, while the Trump administration is directly attacking the institutions and also especially the norms and the conventions of democracy, we've been able to pat ourselves on the back and say, well, it's not as bad here, so we don't need to worry about it as much. And so I think the challenge to us is how do we think much more boldly, much more ambitiously about how we modernize our democratic systems. And we have more ideas there, but I'll pause and turn things over.
Perfect. Awesome. Liz, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah. Is this thing on? Okay. Thanks, Andres. It's wonderful to be here with everyone on the panel and all of you in the audience. Hope to meet some of you over the course of the day. It's lovely to be in British Columbia. The first time I visited British Columbia, I was hitchhiking over an inland land border. Myself, my friend, our bicycles, camping gear. We were in a van full of belly dancers because that's who picked up us scruffy hitchhikers. And it was around Abbotsford, it was east of Vancouver. I'm from the United States. My name is Liz Barry, and my friend and I at that time were on a listening tour around the United States and also briefly here in British Columbia. We had a sign that said, "Talk to me." I painted it myself. For 3.5 years, we listened to strangers and encouraged them to turn and listen to each other. So nowadays, I use software much more often than signs, but I continue to center the personal encounters that transform hearts and engage minds, and how those encounters build up to shape society. In particular, I use the world's most widely used open source software, the one that Audrey Tang on video mentioned, called Polis, to support social movements, governments of all sizes, journalists, and peace builders to deepen a group's understanding of themselves as a whole and to identify how the complexity inside of each individual fits into that whole. My organization is MetaGov, metagov.org. We advance self-governance in a digital age through research and experimentation and play to generate standards and values for governance technologies, the kind you might use if your online group in Facebook has moderation challenges, or what communities trying to govern online resources like Wikipedia do to set up the rules and deal with conflict. So the lesson I have to share is that abstract concepts like democracy need practical skill building, meaning to be free, we have to do things individually and collectively that exercise and strengthen our participatory muscles. non-participatory politics strips us of the need and opportunity to be informed and shields us from the accountability of the decisions that we would make. This creates fertile ground for disinformation and accusation. So I look to digital technologies, specifically the ones built with democratic values inside, as a gymnasium for our participatory muscles. There's another metaphor. This supports the flourishing of individuals and a community's common good. The problem I identify is that the information age has information sicknesses. And in the information age, democracies fall or are torn down from the inside by their own constituents who lose hope in institutions that can't keep up with increasing complexity and the rate of change. Let me be more specific. Our democratic institutions are having a hard time keeping up with their current tooling. If all we have is an election once every few months or once every few years, it's not a tight enough feedback loop. I'll close with a quote from one of my favorite journalists, Joe Matthews, who says, "As politicking nationalizes, the work of governing, solving those local service delivery problems that Andres mentioned, localizes. The work of governing localizes worldwide." And these are the challenges I look forward to taking on with all of you here. Thank you.
Awesome. Lisa.
Thank you. My name is Lisa Shirk. I'm from the University of Notre Dame, or as you say, Notre Dame, here in Canada, where French is part of your linguistic pattern. I am a dual citizen. So I went to the University of Waterloo, where I studied peace studies, and that's now what I teach at Notre Dame. In the field of peace studies, we believe that people have sort of fundamental human rights, but also basic human needs. And some of those needs are the need to feel heard. And so what Liz did in biking around and sort of listening to people is actually a tremendously profound act of hearing people and helping people feel heard. And, you know, Harvard, many universities now have studied this feeling of being heard. And it is a primary drive of our behavior to feel like other people understand what we're going through. And so I want to introduce a new concept that we've been using a lot of metaphors for democracy up here. I think of democracy as a public service that governments and civil society need to provide to people to help them feel heard. At Notre Dame, I run a lab called the Peace Tech and Polarization Lab. Our first major study just sort of outlined how existing technologies really don't help people feel heard. They're designed like a coliseum with a couple people fighting in the middle and everybody else just observing. You know, and really what we want is a, you know, sort of a space where people can be heard. And indigenous cultures, I've worked for 2 years here in Canada with First Nations, you know, and you have talking circles and you have smudging ceremonies and you have many ways to set the stage for people to feel heard and acknowledged. And what I really loved about the smudging ceremony is, you know, the way that you wash your eyes with the smoke and you wash your ears so that you hear good intents in what other people are saying, and you wash your mouth so that you might speak in a way that can be heard by others. So you have a very profound ritual within First Nations cultures to set the stage for really being able to hear each other and acknowledge each other's humanity. What my lab does now is work with technology companies. So mostly I spend my time with technologists, computer scientists, helping them understand these basic psychological principles of what people need in order to feel heard, because most computer scientists do not study that in college. And so they really need somebody who spent their life, bringing Israelis and Palestinians or working in Afghanistan, like to really sort of think about what in the most difficult, toxic, polarized places, what do we need from each other to design an inclusive process? And so I think I'll leave it at that because we're going to get into a lot more. So I'll pass it to John.
Okay, great. Thank you all. Yeah. I'll just say a few words about myself. I appreciate Stephen's very generous introduction. So I'm a resident here in British Columbia. I was raised in British Columbia. I founded an organization called Pivot Legal Society about 25 years ago and led that for about a decade. Thank you. And as some of you know, Pivot does strategic litigation and advocacy on behalf of marginalized people in Vancouver's downtown east side. But after a decade of that, and some victories, but also many losses, you start to get frustrated with the systems. You realize we can push and we can try and prod, but we don't actually get to make the rules. And the systems that were making the rules are just so problematic. So I left Pivot in about 2000 and just started Othello. And shameless marketing. We got a T-shirt printed, so there it is, Othello. And Othello is basically a digital technology that allows groups to kind of tackle complex problems and find outcomes with broad support. So it's kind of a consensus identification platform. It's different than Polis, which is much more kind of about ideas and kind of people connecting. Well, I think one of the points that I would like you to take away actually is that there is a whole ecosystem of deliberative technologies, and there's actually no one that fits all needs. They kind of fit together in different ways. So Othello has a role in that space, and we work with cities and different levels of government in engaging communities to give feedback on public policy issues. It can be budgets, climate planning processes. And so we've been doing this about 15 years now, and it seems like a need that had catalyzed Othello is starting to become more present in people and everyday consciousness. And so, it's good to be able to meet that need with part of a solution. And the solution is to a problem that I think is quite deep. We're grappling with concerns about democracy now, and recent polling results. It seems a new poll every week is coming out about people's concerns about democracy, and it's right up there with climate change. Threats to our society. But the roots are deep. And I think actually what we're seeing is an antiquated system that just can't keep up with the times. Our legislative system, our parliamentary system, was designed in the 1800s. To be honest, hasn't really changed very much since then. Your feedback loop is marking an X in a box every 4 years. I mean, that is if you think about it in technology terms, it's a very low bit rate of information flow. It's hard to keep a dynamic system in tune when you're getting 1 kilobyte of data, every 4 years. I mean, Facebook processes petabytes of data a day. What if our democracy was like that? But because democracy is such a foundation stone to everything, it's untouched. We don't really dare to go in there and upgrade it. But we're not really going to have a choice for much longer. We're either going to have to upgrade it or we're going to lose it. And these are the crisis times that are coming. So I'm hoping that our panel today is going to shed some light on some of the possibilities for a big system shift, an optimistic change towards a better democracy. And we're just beginning. So our first question, we're going to go through 3 questions today. And the first one, I'm going to ask for Jeffrey Marino to come back on camera. And the first question is about polarization. So, can I get Jeffrey on screen? So, we're seeing an increased polarization in politics. Many people have pointed at this as being a critical challenge facing democracy. Please share a bit about your perspective on polarization and what you see as the path forward through that. So can we get Jeff Marino from California on the video camera? Is that possible?
Thanks, John. Yeah, so I mean, many of you there in person and on the panel had touched on such important topics as it relates to polarization and maybe some of the antidotes that we have for that. Upgrading our democracy and our institutions is absolutely critical. And improving and modernizing the way that we deliver services in order to rebuild trust is going to be absolutely critical. Mostly, and I believe Audrey did a wonderful job of noting this in her introductory remarks, which is that we need to rethink our role as government as it relates to democracy as a service, and how we provide the opportunity space for folks to participate in that meaningful civic engagement. And the polarization that we see, especially in America, but really across the world, is primarily mediated through these digital channels that are privatized. And we all understand that in many respects, that polarization leads to profit in many regards. And then, unfortunately, the same voices from our democratic institutions are then mediated through many of those same channels, leading to that same sort of pervasive perspective that we are totally polarized. And I do just want to share briefly our experience in our first engagement in Engaged California, when we were setting up the platform to engage with Los Angelinos on the wildfire recovery. We were warned by many of the stakeholders that we engaged with not to do it. It was too risky. It would lead to toxic back and forth. People were angry, and they already had enough sort of social media channels. As we've launched Engaged California, we've gone through a big sort of change management campaign, both within government, but also with the public, in terms of the difference between this approach and other forms of communication and connection in the digital space. And so we were concerned after hearing from many of our counterparts and stakeholders, and just understanding the climate ourselves from witnessing it every day, that folks were right, and that we were really just going to open up another avenue for toxic a toxic pool. But what we found was that the design, the intentional design, and that design really was demonstrated very beautifully at the opening of the forum today, in terms of ground setting with respect for the community, with an understanding of what we are here today to discuss. And there is one thing that was a surprise to me, and that I've been so pleased with, and again, makes so much sense with my team at the Office of Data Innovation, in terms of their expertise in human-centered design, being able to apply those same principles to design out an experience within a digital democracy platform such as Othello, and that's such a core part of this. And when we design it intentionally and deliberately, in terms of setting up that ground setting space, in terms of asking folks to take a civility pledge when they enter the platform, in terms of guiding the conversation into a very productive and targeted space of civic dialogue, it was incredibly productive. We moderated out less than 5% of the comments, of the over 1,500 comments that we collected in phase one. Most of those comments that we moderated out were actually violating the moderation policy, because they were sharing links to commercial services, which is a violation of the policy, not because they were using obscene language, making personal attacks, or really digging into that polarized culture and dialogue. And so it has made me a very big believer in the opportunity that we have if we can both use these technology tools, but then also pair them appropriately with intentional design and human-centered design, that we can and in fact maybe have the responsibility as government to provide a platform where people can be heard, where that feedback loop can be created, and it's designed in such a way to be productive civic dialogue.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Lisa, would you like to go?
That's excellent, Jeffrey. I think that the design of the platforms matters a lot. And if you have one takeaway, just recognize that technology, as many of us have encountered it, is only one way of designing technology. And it really brings out our worst instincts. But we can design for our better angels, the best in us, our ability to hear and listen to other points of view. And what deliberative technologies like Othello, like Polis, what these technologies allow us to do is to really be able to listen at scale. So listen to a vast number of people in a relatively short amount of time. And it does this in a way that we can't actually do when there's, people in the room and there's only one mic that we're all talking into. So being able to listen at scale also is aided by technology that allows us to see there's not just two ends of the polarization spectrum. It's not a binary polarization. There might be 10 poles if you ask people in California how to deal with wildfires, or here in British Columbia, whether two cities want to merge into one municipality. These kinds of questions are usually not binary. There's usually a variety of different answers. And what technology allows us to see is different opinion groupings and help us actually depolarize the toxic binary approach and see that there's actually a lot of different opinions. And so by actually increasing the number of poles, we get to a less toxic way of communicating, and it helps us to see the complexity of the issue. It's not as simple as this or that or us versus them.
Awesome.
Building on that response from Lisa, which I totally agree with, I can add that there's some innovations that democracy is benefiting from that were actually developed in terms of R&D from over in science. Data science that can handle the complexity of, let's say, the space around the issue with many dimensions, different points that are important to different people with different sets of values and different ideas. The data science perspective on that is, they would say that that is a high dimensional issue space. And to really get into it, we want to actually bring in more and more detail called increasing the granularity of the conversation, meaning we actually want to hear in detail from more people, from everybody. And when we're designing technology to handle that, we can pull on some advanced approaches like machine learning to make sure that as we enter that conversation, we're seeing other people's contributions that either show us we're not alone or else bring us into contact with something that is different from the way we normally think, and build up in our responses to those things that are similar to us, things that are different, things that are just surprising at first, can build up into an opinion map. And then we can use these technologies to help us wayfind across it. So in regard to polarization, if we've been given a binary, everything lumped in as conservative or liberal, I would say many of us individuals are adrift in there. Many of us are independents. Okay, but how do we be independent? How do we handle that complexity within each individual? And I would say there's might be some interesting experiments that you could work with on unbundling the large political parties, like unbundle the set of issues that's come to define these major poles, and figure out how a bunch of independents can actually find what they agree on, and you might be surprised. Thanks.
Is that on? Okay. So the question is about polarization. I think, you know, we spoke earlier about the problems, and frankly, I think we understand well the problems. We understand the polarization issue. What I am way more interested in is action, is in solutions, is in experimentation. I think that's key. I think what Liz said earlier about we need to build the muscle for this. We need to try new things. There's a trial and error aspect to it. I love what Jeffrey and John are doing in California. That is amazing. They're trying something at scale, right? And they're iterating as they go. They're seeing how it works. As Jeffrey said, they really weren't sure how it was going to go. So I'll use my time here rather than dwelling on the polarization to talk about something we're trying, an experiment we're doing. So one of the challenges, and someone spoke about this yesterday, was how are employers getting engaged in this? They industry, big organizations, they have a stake in our democracy as well. And one of the challenges with regards to polarization is how do you reach, working age Canadians when they are years, maybe they are decades out of their grade 11 civics class? How do you reach them to help to equip them for a lot of the things that are changing in our digital sphere? So one of the things we are experimenting with, we're launching this year, is a new program called Canadian Democracy at Work. And so the idea is it's adapted from something we saw in Europe and also south of the border. The idea is how do you deliver civic and digital literacy education to working age Canadians? How do you reach them? And so the vector we're looking at is working through their employers, working through big companies, also working through labor unions. And so what we've done over the last 6 months is develop 3 digital and civic literacy modules. So one is on understanding our political systems, and the second one is on understanding mis and disinformation and algorithms. The third on understanding AI and deepfakes that people are encountering. And so what we've done is we're in the trial sort of testing phase. We're experimenting. But so we're testing it with some big companies. So we partnered with TELUS, we partnered with Interac, with a few others. Other types of institutions like the Toronto Library System, and there are many other libraries across the country that are very interested. And also with labor unions, including like a big teachers union in Ontario. You can actually pull it up now on your phones if you're interested. The website is at teamdemocracy.ca. So they're basically video-based learning modules. You'll see the face of it is Canadian icon and former CTV News anchor Lisa Laflamme, and it's also offered in our other official language in French. But so we're trying this, and so I put this out there because we're going to be launching it publicly in the next month or so with a call to action. This was supported through some government funding, and so it's free to use. So we would love to get other companies, other organizations on board and experiment. Let's experiment.
Great. Thank you, Andre. And I'll just add a few words on this concept of polarization too. And I think it's interesting to look at our democratic systems and the way we actually do voting as possibly a source of polarization. We live in we seem to equate democracy with majority rule. And well, it's majority rule actually in a way that leads to the polarization. With majority rule, you have winners and losers. You either got your guy in or your lady in, or you didn't, and you're on the outs, right? But this is not necessarily the only concept of democracy. It's actually rooted in kind of a Greco-Roman understanding of how military corps decided their leaders. They just vote winners and losers, right? But there was actually kind of a renaissance in Europe around the 17th, 18th century when Europe made contact with indigenous communities of North America and came to grips with a different concept of democracy. Right? And actually, many First Nations have deeply rooted concepts of democracy where, can you imagine a First Nation putting something to a majority vote and thinking that is going to be healthy for the community? That is not how they do democracy. They will go in a circle, they will listen, they will debate, they will talk for a long time until people come to a shared view. And in that situation, it's not about everyone having an equal right to vote, but perhaps more about everyone having equal right to be heard or to be satisfied with the outcome. This is also an idea of democracy, and I think one that is going to serve us much more powerfully in the future. So we need to think about, are our fundamental understandings of interpretations of democracy going to lead the path to where democracy needs to go in the future? Because I think there's much more to democracy than that. We are going to do a bit of a condensation of our presentation. We had 2 more topics we were going to touch on. We're going to collapse them into a single topic. I'm going to get you to lead us, Lisa. But the first one, and we're going to merge them, is about the role of technology, and try to bring some nuance and color to the idea of DemTech. Maybe you haven't heard that term, but democracy technology, it's actually a big space. And then also tie in the idea of institutional renewal. How can we get to a place where our democratic institutions start to reflect some of these emerging technologies, these emerging opportunities to use information technology? So, Lisa.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to just be really short and say, in the world today, we already know there's a democracy, backlash. We in the United States are facing some very significant challenges, and we're starting to see that civil society needs to provide democracy as a service to people, and that social movements need to be using digital democracy to help people have a voice in thinking about how we respond to some of the biggest challenges we've ever faced in the United States. I say this because there is no reason why every single morning of the week we can't wake up and look on a democracy platform about the issues that are affecting our community and participate in the decisions that are being discussed online. So, here you might wake up and you might talk about water quality or environmental issues or the highest heat index yesterday in the history of Canada was recorded yesterday in BC, 104 degrees or 40 degrees Celsius. Sort of these issues that are on our minds, we can be waking up, looking at a platform, listening to what our neighbors are saying, and weighing in on how we feel the solutions need to look like, what we believe is, and how the issues are affecting us. And democracy can be this muscle thing that we do every morning, is participating in sharing our experiences and thinking about what action does our community need to take. And if our government's not going to do that for us, then civil society groups can start doing it for us so that we can start exercising this muscle of listening to other people and sharing our experiences and our ideas of what needs to happen.
You're here. John, do you want us to also do our concluding statement, or will that be another round?
Yeah, maybe we'll merge it all together, and then we'll give some time for questions, things like that. So yeah.
Okay, great. I have like 4 minutes then. Okay, thanks. So we had a plan, you guys. So one of the things all 4 of us agreed to talk about at the start was that social media's failures show us why we must build trust, transparency, and accountability into the infrastructure of digital democracy. John wrote that phrase out for our panel. And to add to that, I wanted to say, knowing what we now know about social media, what would we have required? Data privacy, data portability, full disclosures on any reuse of data, transparency into the algorithms that govern how we encounter each other online. What about actual governance power over those algorithms and the ability to change them to something that might work better? Another point that John wrote out for us is that each community requires a different configuration of tools and processes. There is no one size fits all. So interoperability between platforms is essential. And I wanted to introduce some of the collaboration that is happening across multiple tool builders at MetaGov and partnering institutions like Lisa's group and many more, to develop a vision for a healthy tech ecosystem where these support systems for democracy, for democratic encounters, are not plagued by corporate capture and big tech dominance the way it happened on social media. That's something we can all work on together. It's like an advocacy platform. So you may hear more from our group later. So those are the things we don't want. What we want to do is maximize local creativity and put in short enough feedback loops that once people actually have their say and make a decision on the way their local government works, they can actually see how it went and learn from it. Okay, so we get better locally at being free. The next theme involves pathways to institutionalization. And so I wanted to mention there's a project going on in Canada that for any of you in government who work on procurement, this is like an interesting, different way to do it. So for some years already, the government of Scotland has already helped its agencies package up any of their wicked challenges into an accelerator program called CivTech. And then teams apply and compete to develop solutions in line with the government's vision. And winning teams get an advantage in getting a government contract to then deliver those solutions. And the government gets exactly what they wanted, terms and everything. So this is a new twist on procurement that I just wanted to say is a possibility in this space. And last year, the Scottish government put out a challenge around public engagement, and that's brought investment into this deliberative technology space, which could help Canada. It's only fair because Canada federally has already helped this ecosystem of deliberative tooling, honestly, for years already, from stages all over the world. I have thanked the government of Canada, specifically a Cultural Heritage Agency, which invested in the Polis platform to build a translation module. That means that people, whether they were writing in French or Arabic or anything, can write in whatever language they want and then see each other's words exactly in the language that they were written in, but with a side-by-side translation into the reader's own language. So thank you, Canada, for that. Towards institutionalization, Taiwan, where Audrey Tang, the cyber ambassador, was speaking from in her video, in 2014, they had a moment, they had a little democracy stumble, and their parliament was occupied by students and hundreds of thousands of people occupied the plaza outside. Okay, but for 8 years before that moment, the Taiwanese government had been running a national training program to teach youth how to facilitate. And so when hundreds of thousands of people got in the street, that population was full of trained facilitators. And that movement was very calm and orderly. I was there myself in person. That's another story. And those youth broke that crowd into small groups and passed the mic around, took notes, brought people with different opinions into supported conversation with each other, and passed the summaries up from all of the small groups into one giant consensus statement that they delivered to their parliament, and then everyone went home. I would like to be part of a movement like that. So then the day after the revolution, the government said, wow, that facilitation training was really got us a lot of bang for the buck. Let's make another training. And so they did. They made a training for their civil servants to run new e-democracy tools to consult the whole nation on more equitable rulemaking. And so for those of you who are circulating in this scene, maybe you've heard of vTaiwan before, but you might not have heard that there was a training program for civil servants to help manage the organizational change required to do this listening at scale. So my conclusion for us today is that democratic health and competence requires more people encountering each other in environments that deepen each person's understanding of their own positions, brings them into contact with others' positions, and creates a learning environment equipped with critical information. And so the tools and methods for listening broadly can provide these environments alongside existing democratic institutions. And the repeated use of these tools and methods will strengthen people as democratic citizens and renew the connection between institutions of government and the people that they are of, by, and for. Thank you.
Okay, so I know we are probably tight for time, so I'll try and go quickly, and I'll close on two things. So firstly, I would say that they are really the experts on the DemTech tools. So I will give you more of a practical example of where this can be used. And so this is something that we're doing some deals on the sidelines of the Victoria Forum yesterday with Matt and with John around the use of Othello. So we're running this big program called Screen Break. We do some work in the sort of kids and tech sphere. Screen Break is about the school phone restriction policies that are being rolled out, that have now been rolled out across all 10 Canadian provinces over the last year or so. I think hearts are in the right places in moving forward with these policies. But as we know, education, K-12 education, is a provincial jurisdiction. So you have 10 different policies, all rolled out a little bit sort of ad hoc. And then you have these vast education systems trying to grapple with, well, how do we put these things in place? These ministerial directives that roll all the way down to our schools out in the community. So we're doing a project to support the successful design and implementation of these policies. We've set out across the country to engage people on it. How is this going? So in the last few months, we were able to do roundtables in all the 10 provinces. Great way to meet people face to face. The problem is you can put 15, 20 people in a room. So it's not really a representative sample of, we're able to do national polling. So a national representative, sample of 2,500 Canadians, their attitudes on these issues. That's great, but you're asking pretty high level questions. You're not really able to dig in. So our challenge is, how do we connect with these vast communities of policymakers, school board officials, educators, school principals, and students, critically students, youth on these issues at something resembling scale? And so this is where we see a huge opportunity for Othello, and what we're planning to, I hope, we haven't signed the paperwork yet, but roll out later this year, is the opportunity to engage these communities, potentially through a deliberative process to understand, like, how would these policies work better from their vantage? How could they be better rolled out across our school systems? And how can we create feedback loops to take that input up to the policymakers who are shaping these policies, who are refining these policies? So just a quick example of something, a place where this really fills a critical gap in terms of engaging people in the sort of policy and democratic process. And I would close with this kind of final point about, like, how do we deploy, how do we institutionalize these things? I would say in the broadest sense, there are two paths. One path is you can do so in partnership with governments. So call it the California model, where a government says, I am willing to cede some power, and I am willing to adapt my process, my decision-making process, in order to include these new types of tools, and most importantly, include citizen voice and participation in these processes. That is a very important pathway. I think the challenge these days is we've seen that a lot of governments are not that willing to do that. They're not that willing to cede the power and change the way they do things. The other vector is we, through civil society, do it of our own volition. Kind of like this Screen Break example. These tools enable us to mobilize and engage people at scale. So there is an opportunity for folks outside of formal institutions to engage people around important policy issues. You can assemble a large enough, mobilize a large enough number of people, allow them to prioritize, deliberate, identify the types of policy solutions they would want, and then you bring them to governments, and you seek to influence, and you seek to take back that power through the mobilization of all these people, in the same way that we see, corporate lobbyists and various other interest groups already doing these types of things. So I see these two paths. I think we need to be doing both at once. I think the second path will open the door to more of the first path. And I think in closing, we just need to go. We can't keep dwelling on these problems. We need to go. Digital democracy tools and other ways to reinforce and to experiment in improving and modernizing our democratic institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. So to the booth, we'll bring on Jeff Marino for our last kind of closing statement from one of the panelists. And then we'll just circle up about that link that I shared earlier. And we'll invite, some questions and some feedback, and I'll set kind of how that will work in a moment. Do we still have Jeffrey? And can we bring him on screen? Perfect. You're on, Jeffrey.
Great, thank you. I'll focus primarily on the institutionalization point, and I'll try to be brief because I think we're out of time. But I will say I think that this is a great opportunity. I know that there are some policymakers there in the audience, and we are right now focused on completely outdated methodologies as it relates to civic engagement. I think we've covered that here on the panels. In 1860, I believe, somewhere around there, Alexis de Tocqueville writing about democracy in America, paraphrasing something around the fact that town halls are to democracy what primary schools are to science. It puts them into the people's reach and helps us to play with it and understand it. We are still doing town halls the same way we were doing them in 1860. And our population in the United States has 10x'd since then. When that was written, the telephone wasn't invented. So we really need to up our game as it relates to connective technology and civic engagement. And those tools are within our reach. We need the political will to be able to do that. Andre really keyed in on the willingness to see that power. And I think it's a good opportunity in terms of what Audrey was saying at the beginning and changing some of our perspective as it relates to representative democracy and the role of our legislature being closest to constituents and sort of being the voice that translates their needs into policy. And then that policy goes to the executive branch to be quote unquote executed in that regard. I think there's a great opportunity for the legislative branch to look to and put pressure on the executive branch to put these tools into practice within the administration and carve out a permanent space that is cross-cutting across the different silos of government that fosters a staff that has these skill sets, that opens up the space to bring on these tools and technologies, and then sets them on a mission of scaling it across the government so there can be that continuous dialogue that is fostered throughout the implementation and delivery of the services that are demanded by the people.
Great close, Jeffrey. Thank you very much. So I know that we're very short on time. I mean, you can remain here at your forbearance. We'll stick around for a bit. I just want to share, the results of that link that I posted earlier. And what we have, I think it looks like almost everyone in the hall voted. So congratulations, everyone. We have about 80 people voted. Lowering the voting age came out at 82% consensus. Proceeding with passive deliberative democracy, 80%. Some form of proportional representation at 76%. And then more referenda at 35%. And so, in the course, with part of your attention, over the course of the last hour, we undertook a multi-criteria decision-making process. Now, whether those are the right criteria or not, up for debate, but, some form of moderately sophisticated analysis, examining these different things. Imagine what would be possible if we actually went at it with some force, in the size of group over, distributed over a couple of days, et cetera. You can get pretty smart insights coming out of almost any group of people. And if you have a representative group, a large representative group, you get mandates of action, and very powerful ones. So with that, I think we have a couple of mics. I'm not going to actually invite questions. I'm also going to invite you to provide feedback to us. Where do you see the opportunities? What do you think of these tools? And, we invite your feedback along with a question. So And I see Stephen coming up. He's going to let us know how much time we actually have here. How much time do we have, Stephen? How many questions should we try to have here?
Probably just one or two, John. I think
Perfect.
we're
Great.
under some
So
time pressures here. Thank you.
please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. I'm not sure that I have any real questions to tender, but perhaps some comments on democracy and technology, starting with the latest news. From Vancouver City Council and the Parks Board, they've really done the U-turn on climate change and technology, using Signal Messenger and disappearing messages to step outside of the ethical requirement for public meetings and decide to turf, or rather AstroTurf, a field for competitive soccer, and to dump some of the city's climate change initiatives. So let's all give a hand for the political party ABC. And here in Saanich, we had a local government's move called the alternate approval process, where citizens got up and went out and signed a petition, which each signature had to be on 6 typewritten pages to overturn a massive spending bill. So that's the preface. My name is William Gibbons, and my studio name is Influency,
Great.
which in light of today, everyone's giving words like that a bad name, but I coined it many years ago.
Perfect. Thank you.
And
We'll have
so-
one more question.
I'd like to make a comment. I am a Canadian who did a democratic experiment with technology in 1997. That was one of the first public internet kiosks and first online internet petitions to the Parks Board.
Before we
And-
go on, I would just like to have a bit more time. We have very limited time, so I might move to one more question. Is that okay?
Sure, I'll answer questions from the audience if you like.
Well, you know what? We'll have one more question and then we'll all be available, circulate around, and people can come up and ask questions if they like. Would you like to go?
Thank you. Yes, it's Claire Atwell with Regenerate Cascadia. Bi-regional regeneration is my area. And I just want to say it's a joy to hear what you're talking about. This is the conversation we need. The thing that I see is that we have, as you were pointing to, centralized decision making and the capacity for communities to do collective sense making has really been eroded. And so while the technology is critical for holding those larger conversations, the sense making on the ground and the conditions for doing that and the trust building and relationship building is very denuded. And just wondering if there's anything you can point to that you know of where the intersection of Demtech, I've not heard that term before, is coming together without those kind of processes. So.
Anyone like to speak? This, I think this is on your bound.
Hi, it's great to meet you. I've heard about your organization before, and I am in conversation with the bioregional movement generally about the beautiful mission that you have. Probably a few of us might be able to comment on this, but you know, how do these online technologies come into our local in-person communities? And I would say with careful design, I personally have interwoven this listening at scale into sociocratic processes. I don't want to get into jargon here, but just since it sounds like you're very involved in, you know, small group process, I would say, yeah, it's a process design question. Loosely, design thinking has brought us a frame of the double diamond, where to approach a problem, first you want to go big and diverge and bring in lots of perspectives and ideas, kind of like how Lisa was talking about. Like we need to source a diverse set of opinions and let them stand on their own merits. And then there's a convergence process, a process to bring coherence then out of all of that volume of participation. And the simplest process design that I recommend, and I've developed this with Audrey Tang, the cyber minister, is ridiculously called the diamond sandwich. So the diamond is from the double diamonds. The sandwich is from, say you need to do a group process. And if anyone's ever done a group process in the times before this technology existed, you've done it in person. So that's your starting point. So you're in person. And then you can bring in digital technology to either go into that high dimensional and fine grained detail that we were speaking about before, or engage even larger numbers of people. But even if it's the same number of people you started with, you can still go into a technological space to help you process the complexity. So that's the digital mystery meat in the sandwich. And then you put the other bread on, you get back together in person and talk about what you've just learned about the issue space. So that's how you have the diamond of information processing on top of the sandwich. Yeah, if diamond sandwich, the AI generated images of diamond sandwiches are really ridiculous. Okay, I'm gonna stop here, but just say process design is a very interesting and rich field for any one of you who are organizers or facilitators. You might get very interested in some of this technology. Thank you.
All right, I've been given a signal from Stephen that we're done. But we'll be all around here today, and happy to, we'll stick around. We'll turn off the mics. We'll hang out here a little bit, but we're all very appreciative of your attention and that you are interested in these issues, and we'd love to chat more with all of you. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much, John and panelists. It's been wonderful to have you here, and I think this is a theme, such an important underlying and overarching issue for us at this time, and really appreciate your leadership. So we're going to explore the democratic question a little further from another angle this afternoon after lunch, a session called Defending Canada's Democracy, which will include perspectives from the recent Saanich Victoria referendum process with the Civic Assembly. So those of you who are interested in democracy, and I hope that's many of you, encourage you to attend that session as well. So please join me again in thanking this wonderful panel. And I'll just quickly mention that something that's going on at the forum is that there are a lot of side meetings going on. It's not just that people forgot to show up today. They're actually in other parts of this building and elsewhere conducting intense conversations that, oh, since you're here, let's make sure that we meet and spend some time together. This happened yesterday with this group. We had Jeffrey Marino coming in from California in a meeting with the Minister of Citizen Services, Diana Gibson, talking about potential collaboration, and very much looking forward to that conversation continuing. So thank you again, and we'll let you leave the stage whenever you like. A couple of other things to mention. We are running on a very tight schedule here. So when I let you go in a moment, I would encourage you to refresh, come back soon, rather than the full 20 minutes. If we could cut that to 10, 15, that would be enormously helpful to us and would ensure that the following sessions have the time that we want them to take. I am going to just take a moment though and share a message that Saul and I received this morning from one of our Japanese participants. I can get my phone to behave. Here is what Hideyuki Inui sent to Saul and I, commenting on the forum, and just have a listen to this. I want to share how I am enjoying the forum and appreciate it. Let me briefly tell you how quickly. This became a really great opportunity for me and my Japanese colleagues to learn and catch up on what is going on in Canada and internationally in deeper contexts and concrete visible and invisible systems, really visually. Especially, I loved the parallel sessions in the afternoon yesterday. Also, and this is the key point, because this is about the technology complement to this kind of deliberation, the wordly translation is amazingly working for me and other Japanese participants. This is not just a translation, it's better than verbal interpretation. This is like a movie with subtitles where you can feel the original conversation. Moreover, we can observe what's going on and be more aware of both cultural contexts in English and our native language. Kenta, Tomioka, and I actually open up the window of translation on an iPhone and AI on a PC screen, and we can immediately ask background questions about something we did not know about Canadian social systems, First Peoples background, for example, which creates wider and deeper views during sessions. This is so innovative in an international conference and enables us to have a deeper understanding and communication with other participants. So that's also happening here. We're innovating as we go, learning. And so please, thank you so much. See you soon. It's 10:20. Please be back by 10:30 if you can. Thank you. Welcome back. We're going to get underway. We'll be getting underway in just a moment or two. If you could please take your seats. And we have quite a wonderful panel coming up. So I see a few people still coming in. If you could quickly take your seats, we're keen to get underway and keep as close as we can to the schedule. So thank you for taking your seats now, and we will be able to get started. So perhaps I'll just say a few words about what we're about to experience together. The image of an iceberg comes to mind for me when we think about large systems and what's visible and how much there is underneath that we can't see. We're going to be in the presence of 4 icebergs, people the depth of their work and thinking and years of commitment to social transformation is prodigious. And so 4 authors really. I'm going to turn this over to, I'll introduce Nate Hagens first. And Nate and I discussed a number of ways that we could structure the panel. And I'll just tell you who Nate is, first of all, in case you don't know. I'll just do a brief introduction here. He's the director of the Institute for the Study of Energy and Our Future, and host of the popular podcast platform, The Great Simplification, which is globally the number one podcast on earth sciences, part of the Apple, that whole universe. I have to say, I've been listening to it for years. I first came across Nate 20 years ago when he was the founder of the Post-Carbon Institute. Some of the most cogent and focused thinking about what we were heading towards and what we needed to do as a result. It helped me personally work with some colleagues on creating the Transition Accelerator, something that took Canada's industrial economy as a critical target for us to focus on and to come at in different ways. We heard from Bentley Allen from the Transition Accelerator yesterday, and Dan Wicklum, our founding executive director, was here on the geothermal panel. But it's that depth of thinking and depth of analysis that we're going to be participating in, I think, that drives the deeper changes or informs the deeper changes that we are going through. So it's not just Nate. He's going to introduce a panel of 3 authors of recent books. But instead of having Nate talk about the work that he's doing in The Great Simplification, we've agreed that we should show you a video instead, an example from that platform that frames the topic of the superorganism, term that Nate coined to describe humanity's presence on this planet, and therefore some of the dimensions and dynamics that we have to take account of when we're talking about transformative change. Could I invite Nate and the panelists to come on stage if they haven't left the building? There we go. Okay. Vanessa, James, Adam, thank you. Please welcome the panel. Great. Okay, so we can cue that video and we'll get underway. Meta crisis or meta consequence, facing and dealing with the mess we have created.
Modern civilization looks impressive and invincible. Markets grow, planes fly, artificial intelligence has arrived. But something doesn't feel right. Beneath the surface, more vital signs are flashing red. There are lots of people working on cures, but we are mostly prescribing fixes without first diagnosing the underlying condition. The patient is now the fully coupled system of the global human economy and Earth's biosphere. The symptoms we're seeing and feeling do make sense once we zoom out and see how the whole system fits together. Most people narrowly believe money powers the world, but it's really energy. Animals were the first investors, spending some calories to gain more. This surplus energy built organisms, ecosystems, and eventually human cultures and this civilization. 2 centuries ago, we tapped the stored energy of ancient sunlight in the form of coal, oil, and gas. The oil in a single barrel combined with a machine can do around 5 years of human labor for mere pennies. Portable, concentrated, incredibly cheap magic. This fossil jackpot underpins the phenomenon of the carbon pulse, a one-time release of energy stored over geologic time. In under 200 years, we've burned what took millions to form. This wasn't a paycheck. It was a trust fund with which we've been throwing a planet-wide party. When paired with machines, this huge energy surplus did wonders. Population, production, and profits all soared, powered by an invisible fossil army, 500 billion human workers strong. But such power came with blind spots. Our culture confused the tiny cost of fossil energy with its enormous value and ignored the pollution impacts almost entirely. We built a global economy fully dependent on these 2 hidden subsidies, without acknowledging them, without even seeing them. We remain today energy blind, mistaking financial and technological growth for progress and forgetting what enabled and powered it all. In nature, complexity builds through flows of energy and materials. Forests, coral reefs, brains, all emerge from this dynamic. Human systems are no exception. Cities, economies, technologies, all self-organize as emergent structures powered by energy, shaped by matter. The pursuit of energy in nature creates patterns. A single starling follows 3 simple rules: stay close to your neighbor, but not too close, and move towards the center. From these simple animal behaviors, a breathtaking shape, a murmuration, appears in the sky, fluid, unpredictable, and alive. This is emergence in nature. Emergence happens in the human world too. Billions of individuals, businesses, and nations each follow simple cultural rules: seek profit, minimize cost, grow, all tethered to energy, materials, and ecosystem impact. The result? Global physical patterns no one designed, no one intended, and few are planning around. Zoom out far enough, and human civilization itself starts to look and act like a giant organism with its own metabolism. Data flows echo neural signals. Highways and shipping lanes function like veins and arteries, with gasoline and diesel as the blood. Fractal nodes in a global system, each year requiring a higher baseline metabolic requirement. What has emerged is something new, something massive, a globally synchronized economic superorganism built from energy, machines, and billions of human decisions, driven both by biological and cultural incentives, a mindless, unplanning, energy-hungry superorganism. This superorganism isn't evil. It doesn't feel. It doesn't care about equity, ecology, or human well-being. It just optimizes for throughput, for scale, for more, even when more becomes the problem. There is no mastermind at the wheel, just billions of incentives aligned in the same direction toward extraction and consumption. We've inadvertently built a system that rewards material expansion, not wisdom, and we've outsourced our decision-making to markets and algorithms. As a result, in the past 30 years, we have consumed more energy and materials than all humans before us combined. Our current culture feels like it will continue forever, but infinite growth on a finite planet is not possible. No energy surplus, no economy, and technology on its own won't save us because it runs on the same fuel and has the same master. The superorganism cannot see what's coming. It doesn't anticipate, it only reacts. And the signals it reacts to, profits, prices, ignore the deeper long-term risks. So far, our collective response to limits has been to go deeper into ecological and biophysical debt. Buy now, pay later at a planetary scale. The buy now, pay later is now in full effect. When central banks print money, they are not printing oil, copper, or lithium. They're printing claims on them. We can double the money supply, but the fossil fuels, the forest, the metals, the orangutans, they haven't changed. The financial system assumes endless growth, but the physical world, both the sources and the sink, have limits. For over 2 centuries, growth has been our default, fueled by energy abundance and amplified by financial systems. But we're now hitting ecological, energetic, and social constraints. The cultural story of more is colliding with physical reality. What if more money doesn't help, but just accelerates our transmutation of non-renewable wealth into temporary income? The upslope of the carbon pulse brought growth and complexity. On the downslope, the inverse will happen. Less energy, less complexity, less more. A great simplification is not a maybe, it's a when. The economic superorganism is not something humans planned for, nor wanted. It is an emergent phenomenon of large numbers of social primates interacting with large energy surplus without a map. Downstream of aggregate behavior, as individuals, humans continue to seek the emotional states that served our ancestors, but we now live in a world of scale, speed, and stimulation they never faced. We're a species far out of context. But we're not just individuals. We're deeply social animals. Our values and behaviors adapt to our cultural environment. And culture can change, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly. It is in our wiring to shift, once the story shifts too. Here's the hopeful twist. The things that truly bring us joy and meaning are not tied to material consumption. Once our basic human needs are met, what fulfills us is ancient, connection, purpose, time in nature, being in service. Humans don't need endless growth to live rich, meaningful lives. So, what can we do as this superorganism reaches old age? Responses fall into 4 broad categories: policy, biophysical realism, planning for bending, not breaking in the Great Simplification; cultural, new stories, less hubris, more trust and social capital; community, mutual aid, local and regional food and supply chains, ecosystem repair; and personal, skills, mindset, connection, meaning. We can't easily steer or stop the economic superorganism, but we can seed what comes next. Each of us can be the mitochondria in the cells of a different social organism being born in the not-too-distant future, in communities, in bioregions, in gatherings across the world. It's already happening. The stakes have never been higher for humans and for the biosphere. Power scales up. Energy, money, control, hierarchy. Life scales deep, interconnection, regeneration, community. The future depends on which of these we feed. This isn't just a crisis. It is a rite of passage for Homo sapiens. The superorganism we are part of today is not our destiny as a species, but a fork in a long road. So start the conversation, build local resilience, consider being B+ in service of life. Join those shifting the story, participate in the coming great simplification. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. We have about an hour left, and it's much better that we watch the video than had me go through 100 slides, believe me. We are going to hear from each of our three panelists, Adam Kahane, James Stouch, and Vanessa Andreotti, and probably then have a conversation with the four of us. And I think we'll start with Vanessa, and I'll briefly introduce each of them in turn. And at the end, we'll save around 15 minutes or so for questions from the audience, and we'll line up and maybe take a few from either side and see how the panel responds to those. So probably not needing much of an introduction here is my friend and colleague Vanessa Andreotti, who is a professor of education here, recently the Dean of Education. Her book, Hospicing Modernity, impacted me and probably many of you, and her new book is Outgrowing Modernity, Navigating Complexity, Complicity, and Collapse with Accountability and Compassion. Vanessa, what would you add to what you just saw, and how does that merge with your current view of the world?
Thank you. So, you were asking me before if frameworks were important in creating an understanding of the problem, and I think that's absolutely right, but we will have many frameworks, and each framework will have an implicit theory of change in it. And what I've been saying in my book is that the problem is not primarily informational, it is relational. And a relational problem needs to be dealt with very differently from an informational problem. So we would need to be asking what got us here in a relational way. So the book talks about the pedestal we built for our species, grounded on reason, and how that pedestal isolated us from the other intelligences of the metabolism. And that's how the superorganism became this hyper-rational machine that feeds the economy as if it is the ends and not the means of survival. And the other thing that is important, I think, to recognize is that when we talk about collapse, right, as something that is coming, we forget that collapse is already happening for us to be here today and has been happening as a result of that peak for us to be here today. What's eroding right now is the buffer that certain countries have had against this collapse. So understanding it as an arc allows us to ask different questions. So for example, in the book, I start with three questions. The first one is, what if you could sit with the knowledge that you already have in your bones, that what's comfortable and convenient today is not going to be viable very soon? And what if we could respond as a culture with emotional sobriety, relational maturity, intellectual discernment, and intergenerational and interspecies responsibility? And the third question is, what would people born today, 30 years from now, look back and say, what you did was helpful? So sitting with these questions allows us to not see ourselves as just these agents and trying to just fix the system with the same thinking that created the system, but take a step back and understand it in a much longer arc. And understand the effects of colonialism, of slavery, of racism, but also of the exceptionalism of our species that creates these hierarchies, that treats land as property. So if we don't start thinking about this as a species, we won't be able to coordinate as a species. And it's going to be very beautiful to be thinking we can create community in a certain way, but the composting of what led us to the mess we're in is not going to happen. So I think what I'm inviting us all to sit with is the need to compost the literal and metaphorical shit that we have created and contribute to before we can skip the shit into an ideal, right? The ideal, what comes next comes from the composting. It's not a projection from where we are now.
Thank you, Vanessa. You actually said shit more than any other of my podcast guests. So next we'll move to Adam Kahane, who is a co-founder of Rios Partners, an international social enterprise that helps people move forward together on their most important and intractable issues. Adam is also the best-selling author of 6 books translated in 20 languages, including Solving Tough Problems, Collaborating with the Enemy, and most recently, Everyday Habits for Transforming Systems, the Catalytic Power of Radical Engagement. Adam, what would you have to add to the video or the setup here so far, given the lens of your work?
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Nate. And when I looked at these books of the 4 of us yesterday, I was really struck by the remarkable complementarity, so I'm thrilled to be here with you all. What struck me these last few days in your video, but also in all of the sessions yesterday and this morning, is a very clear articulation of the challenges we face. Daunting challenges we face. If I can make them more daunting, I will just report what a friend of mine said to me a few weeks ago, a former federal deputy minister. He said, "I'm not sure we in Canada realize that we are the Ukraine of North America," which doesn't necessarily mean we will face an armed invasion, but we are already facing and will probably face more pressure and undermining from our hegemonic neighbor to the south, and we don't have a bunch of other neighbors as Ukraine does. So I add that to the list of challenges just to pose what for me is the fundamental question, or the question that I'm focused on, which is how can we respond effectively to the challenges we face in a context where, at least according to many people here from the conversations yesterday, we are needing to respond well in a context in Canada and globally of increasing fragmentation and polarization and demonization. So on the first, the wonderful panel on Sunday night, Chief Littlechild summarized what I think is required very simply and beautifully. We have to work together inclusively, and that's been echoed by many other speakers here. The question I have is how? How do we do that? How do we address the challenges we're facing, the ones you mentioned and all of the others, together and inclusively? To give you the good news first, in my experience, it can be done. It is possible to work together across our deepest differences. It's not easy, it's not straightforward, it's not guaranteed, but it can be done. I've seen it with my own eyes hundreds of times. So let me just give you just the basis on which I make this assertion, and then what I think is the essential principle required to do this. I'm from Montreal. I used to work in the corporate sector. In 1991, I went to South Africa and facilitated a series of workshops during the period of the transition from apartheid to democracy. And the workshops, which became known as the Montfleur Scenario Exercise, brought together all of the leaders of all of the sections of South African society, black and white, men and women, business, politics, trade unions, civil society, academia, left and right, opposition and establishment. And this is when I first realized that it is possible to work together even with people we don't agree with or like or trust. And to make a long story short, I quit my job and emigrated to South Africa and married the project organizer, the usual story. And this is what I've been doing. This is what I've been doing for the 35 years since, in an organization called Rios Partners. There's two of my colleagues who live in Victoria, Brenna Atnikoff and Monica Pullman, that are here, and have done this over and over and over on sustainable food, fashion, mining, energy, climate, education, health, indigenous sovereignty, security, peace, throughout all of the Americas, Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and these 6 books about the how. So the point I'm trying to make is, sometimes these last few days, people have said, oh, we have to do this, we have to work together across difference, just seems so impossible, mysterious. I don't think it is at all. I think it's a well-established body of theory and practice. Now, the last thing I'll say in this introductory is just the last few days, I think I found a simple way to explain the essence of what's required to do this. And the essence is that, and this in a way goes against, in a tonal way, goes against the tone of the video and the tone of many of the talks. So I'm saying this in a challenging way just to open this up. The tone is, there's one whole. We're all in this together. There's one whole. Why don't we, let's just deal with our situation. And I think this is a fundamental misunderstanding, that in fact, the situation we're dealing with is we have multiple wholes, different people, different cultures, different nations, different systems, different species. And the implicit assumption and focus on the good of the whole prevents us from dealing with the challenges we face. We either ignore the other wholes, or we conflate them, or we think we have to defeat them. And what's required is to work together across multiple wholes. We've done this in these hundreds of processes around the world over the last 30 years. And these are, relatively complicated workshops. And it always struck me that the very simplest thing in the workshop was always the most popular. So after the hexagons and the dialogue and the Lego and the prioritization, etc., what I've done tens of times is to say, okay, we've been talking together for a few days now. Let's take 45 minutes, go for a walk, look around the room, find the person in the room who's most different from you, who you never imagined you could talk to, and just go for a walk with them. And people always say, now that was useful. Could we have more of that? These workshop sessions are okay, but could we have more of these walks? So I started to ask, what's with the walks? Why is this, do people experience this as actually being very helpful? And I thought, well, it's a mechanical thing. You're walking together, you're looking at the world together, you're facing obstacles, you're making choices, you're not on your phone, you're not looking at papers. And this is all true, but there's Lucila Cerviche in Mexico said to me, that's not the key thing, Adam. The key thing is the sequence. The sequence is, first, we're encountering the other as a fellow human being. And then second, maybe we will change our thinking or our relationship or our action Lucila is a Catholic theologian. She said it's the opposite of the Catholic confessional, where first you admit you were wrong, and then you're readmitted to the communion of humanity. So this sequence of the first thing is to recognize each other as beings, as deserving of respect and acknowledgement, with those or other epistemologies or nations or cultures or opinions or positions. And this is how, or this is the essence of how it is possible to work together, even with people we don't agree with or like or trust, in order to address the challenges that we are facing in this place and in other places and globally.
Thank you for that. I have a follow-up question on the multiple holes, but let's first hear from James Stotch, who is a social innovation and systems sense maker and educator. He serves as complex systems strategist at ATCO, as a visiting scholar and lead author of The 55 Minutes, an atlas to navigate problems, reveal systems, and as ask beautiful questions in a radically shifting world. James, it took me 20 years to put together that video, and I think many of us feel like the things in our world are super urgent: ocean acidification, inequality, financial overshoot, ecological overshoot, climate, all the things. How do you, in your book and in your work, urge us to slow down, and how does that jive with the urgency of our world?
Yeah, I mean, the book is all about the crucial pause. You know, Albert Einstein was alleged to have said, although there's absolutely no proof that he actually said this, that, you know, if given an hour to solve a difficult problem and your life depended on it, he would spend the first 55 minutes just thinking about the problem, thinking about good questions to ask about the problem. And then the last 5 minutes doing something about it. And the doing something about it, which includes design, any form of action, strategy, planning, and so on, that's where we put all of our currency, all of our incentives, all of our resources, not all of them, but most, as a culture, as a modern kind of post-Enlightenment, post-scientific revolution culture. And in the process, we end up doing a lot of what are sometimes called fixes that fail, or we pursue the wrong problem perfectly. That pause, that crucial pause, allows us to do a variety of things. First of all, it allows the circle to open up. So if you look at AI policy in Canada, for example, the rush to get AI policy out, the quicker you go, the more likely it is that that will be industry dictated, industry designed, right? Because they're well positioned to advise and lobby and so on. And so if you expand the circle, that means going to communities, it means involving other people, being curious about who else is out there, who might have things to say, to contribute. And so there's a kind of, that's the pragmatic reason. But there's also deeper reasons about, okay, well, if we think this is a problem, can we just ask what every problem is a symptom of another problem, right? It's systems all the way up and all the way down. And so if it's systems all the way up and all the way down, that means that there are problems that are subservient or subvariant of other problems. And so taking the time to ask, well, where did this come from? What is this a symptom of? Where does power lie? And who benefits from the status quo? Those kinds of questions are absolutely necessary because our problems are so urgent. So it's counterintuitive. I would just say two things about your video. I love the video. The overall theme of realizing that the energy that drives the economy, which, by the way, as you know, economists don't really talk about that much. It's a bit like the fish discovering they're in the water. We're, oil and gas, this microphone, most of the materials here, most of my clothing, it's all oil and gas, right? And I imagine If you go to Alberta, my home province, and you look around, it will, within 5 minutes, you will see a sticker saying, "I love oil and gas." And there's a version of your video with some clever editing that would go down very well with people who have those stickers, right? Because they're like, finally, you're recognizing that energy is at the base of this. Like our entire civilization, our entire prosperity is based on this. So thank you, right? But then there's other pieces of the message that might not go down quite as well. But there's a thread between what Elder Alphonse was saying this morning in thanking not just the babbling brook and the bushes, but the minerals under the ground and the metals, being grateful for that. How do we, I mean, I think one of the challenges of our time is how do we draw a thread and a civil and productive conversation between the sticker and Elder Alphonse's version of being grateful for what powers our civilization.
Thank you. So I have not read your book. I just got it, but I'm very familiar with the, if you have an hour, spend 55 minutes, the problem, and 5 minutes on solutions. A colleague of Vanessa Andreotti's, Bayo Akumalafe, says the world is urgent, we must slow down. And for many years, I thought that was BS. I didn't understand it. It made no sense. And now I understand it, maybe from my own perspective, that the same way some of, like a psychological coach will tell you to soften your gaze when you're looking at something and you kind of see the periphery. And I realize it myself because for 20 years I've been focused on the human predicament and all these things, and we didn't evolve to handle this much negative information and toxicity and worry and anxiety, and you're focused on the problem and the facts and the synthesis. But when you slow down, it changes your internal regulation and you're able to access viewing the problem from love and equanimity and tolerance and other things that are less left brain. So that was a real awakening for me. Vanessa, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes. I think, thinking about what you're saying too, in terms of understanding the arc, the longer arcs of things and the waves of different empires and understanding the patterns that we have been reenacting as a species, right? So instead of looking at ourselves as groups and cultures, we need to start thinking about what has been the arc of the species. And the left brain and the role of the left brain that you're talking about in this arc, and how the sensibilities and directions that we have from the rest of the body, right, have been demeaned and sometimes exiled from the decision-making process. And I'm avoiding certain words here so that we can talk out of the group thinking, right? But there are some patterns here that we need to observe. Every time that collapses have happened in the ways that we're sensing right now. So we are in the undertow of an empire collapsing, the US empire that came after the British Empire, right? And when sorry, here? Okay, sorry. So if you're in the undertow of the US empire, which is actually a workshop in the afternoon with Giovanna, if you're in the undertow of the Western Empire, we will need to be able to sit with all the emotions, right, that have been repressed in the buildup of this empire. Some people say to me, like, it's irresponsible to talk about collapse. I would say it's irresponsible not to talk about collapse, because if we don't have the time to actually process everything, when it actually is at your doorstep, you won't be able to coordinate. You will be completely overwhelmed with everything. And then looking at how people hold the question of collapse in their hand, you will see several different patterns. There are people who would say, I can't do that. I need to ostrich, or I need to bunker, or I need to party, or I need to exit, or I need to cleanse. And the cleansing is a serious one, because then you will find the scapegoat and you go for the purification, right? And then when we are going to see, as people like you and others put the analysis on the table, there's also a reflex, especially if it's a man putting the analysis forward, that this man will have the answers, right? So we have that reflex, the paternal safety net that will catch us, or we want the woman to also absorb all the grief. So I've been observing these patterns going, and then when we go over that, it's going to be one group against the other. Like, we need to find the culprit, and we'll need to find those who have the solution. And it will be played all over again. And then in that moment, we are going to feel that one group of people can be exceptionalized as having the solutions. And we might also even understand that those who have been oppressed before would yield power differently. But right now, we have that lesson in Gaza, right? Not playing out in the way that that assumption would have projected. So to your point, seeing the larger arc of what we've done as a species, seeing all these choreographies playing over and over again, when we step back and allow these emotions to come forward in spaces that we can process that, that's part of processing the shit and figuring out something other than that. And something other than that might be operating in a way that doesn't focus on representation. We have lots of stories, and if we've been told ourselves that we are made of stories, we are made of more than that. Thank you.
A couple of personal responses to that. On your last point, I have spent 20 years putting together this synthesis, and when someone sees a problem as you were just saying, especially if they're a man, there's this natural assumption that they have the answers, and I don't have the answers. I think humans are probably going to have to use less on average of material throughput. That doesn't have to be a disaster. But more and more, as I learn from podcast guests and experts, I think what we're doing now is we're not finding answers, but we're changing the initial conditions of the future in an emergent way. And these gatherings and the conversations that ensue, we're planting seeds of then changing the moment of 3 years from now, then something else changes, and then that's changing the moment of the things that are possible 10 years from now. And I'm far less interested in solutions, because linear solutions are kind of what got into this. And then my second, just personal, I hope this isn't too personal, but we were together a few nights ago with a group of people on a beach somewhere in this beautiful island that many of you live on. And I realized that at that moment I had internal regulation. I was in a really good place internally. And then I had the co-regulation of the humans around me, which is our ancestral, crucible. And we were laying on a blanket on the beach, looking at the seals and looking at the trees above us and the birds. So there was ecological regulation happening. And I think when you're in such a space where all of that is happening, you're able to view these issues from a much different place instead of anxiety and fear. And I've had to develop that in my own life. Do either of you have something to add to that? Or if not, I have a question for Adam. Yeah, so you mentioned earlier about that we have multiple wholes. So yes, this presentation is a story of the human rite of passage, the human in aggregate. But if we go down to the wholes, then we go all the way down, and the answers or the responses seem to be hyper-local, or maybe an answer for Vancouver Island. So how do you approach the various scales and the stakeholders of the multiple wholes? Because there's climate change. We're about to pass the 7th planetary boundary they're going to announce next month in New York, which is ocean acidification. That's a planet-sized hole. So how do you compartmentalize that?
Well, I'm I'm saying something more more obvious. I'm saying something which I think is completely obvious, but crucial. And I think it goes back to your beach story that in telling the story, you told the story of yourself and the group and the seals and the trees. There are multiple holes, and you were in a state, a self-regulated and co-regulated state that allowed that to coexist. You were not saying to the people and the seals and the trees, this is the truth. Let me so. There's a word, have you ever heard the word holon? H-O-L-O-N? It's bizarrely enough not a well-known word. It was used by Arthur Koestler to refer to the phenomena that there are holes that are part of larger holes. And he said that all of biology was structured in that way.
It's similar to a superorganism.
I guess so. What I find problematic, and I made this reference to your video just because it was the shared experience in the room, is this tendency to say we have to focus on the good of the whole. There isn't such thing as the whole, except in some cosmic sense. Usually the person who's saying we have to focus on the good of the whole, they almost always mean the whole that matters to me. I'm from Montreal, so I'm obliged by my citizenship to quote Leonard Cohen at least once. And he said very beautifully, although all may be one in the higher eye, down here where we live it is too. So I had when I was at Berkeley, I had a friend in architectural history, and she said she'd gone through she once read through all the master's thesis titles in the library of architecture students, and she said the men all had titles like a redesign of San Francisco Harbor, the future of world transport, and the women, at least at that time, had thesis titles more like the design of a new chair for nursing mothers. So her point is this grandiosity, this tendency to grandiosity. There's only one story. There's only one whole. We have to focus on that. And all I'm saying, and I think it's obvious and important, is that let's acknowledge the multiple wholes, because what's the alternative? And this is the final, but I think the crucial point. The alternative is, I say, the whole that matters to me is the only one that matters. Yes, I understand you've got a point, but could we please leave that aside for now? And I think the sharpest version of this in Canada is, yes, we realize that you think you're a nation, but could you just put this aside? We're trying to do something as a country. And what's required, and this is what creates polarization. You'll say, wait a second here, you're not acknowledging what me and what matters to me and my organization and my family and my company and my nation and my people. And this is this I think is the root of the polarization and stuckness and demonization. And so I'm saying something which I think is completely obvious, but strangely under-acknowledged.
Thank you. The reason that I didn't find it obvious is I thought whole was H-O-L-E, I thought it was W-H-O-L-E.
W-H-O-L-E.
Yeah, I had H-O-L-E, so I was thinking ozone.
Oh, I'm
hole,
sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So, James, do you have anything to add to this?
The importance of communication.
The serendipity of improvisation.
I mean, just you're sitting on the beach thing. Made me think of actually one of my former students who's now doing her PhD in Liverpool on the connection between nature and efficacy of incarceration practices that use nature-based practices, and how, I mean, we often have systems that say they do one thing, and then of course they do something completely different, and it's the completely different with the actual outcome that's important to pay attention to. So a correction system, I don't even know what corrections is. Like, how do we know that something or somebody is corrected? But I think there is a lot of deep truth to what you're saying about our interface with the natural world. Is part of the relationality that is the root of so many of the, I don't know, solution pathways that we may want to contemplate taking.
It's unfortunate that we don't have 2 or 3 hours to really dive deep in this, because I think we could go a lot of places. But I would like to invite the audience to see what's on your mind. Do you have any questions for any of us, or just the broader topic? Maybe line up 3. We'll take 3 from each side, given the time constraint, and then we'll choose what to. Oh, time for 1. Time for 1. 1 from each side. Pressure's on.
Thank you so much for the enriching conversation exchange. My name is Vinod, and I'm with the Future of Good. Nate, love the podcast. Thank you so much. It's a question for James, but would love for Vanessa and others to weigh in as well. I've been reflecting on the dynamics and interplay between innovation and justice in complex transitions, and reflecting on questions like, what happens when innovation outpaces justice? So much of today's social justice work is fixing negative externalities from the past that fast-paced innovations and transitions have left behind. And this includes everything from, burning coal to stimulating social media. An inspiring future requires us to imagine and innovate. So how can we apply the principles of innovation and the principles of justice in parallel to complex transitions?
Yeah. Vinod, yeah, you've actually zeroed right in on the kind of two hydra aspect of so many post-secondary institutions, where there's, and especially business schools, where on the one hand, there's an emphasis and almost fetishism of rapid prototyping, rapid iteration, solutionism, hackathons, social venture pitch competitions, that whole thing. That's what actually led us down this path that eventually ended up in the 55 minutes, was this notion, and Nate, you mentioned that we are living out of context. So much of this form of education is completely divorced from context. Yet, on the other side of the academy, there are the people who, won't go near a business school or see it with kind of an irredeemable taint, and make all kinds of assumptions about what goes on inside a business school that occasionally might be correct, but usually is not. How do we get those people in the same kind of conversation space? It's not likely to happen inside the academy. And this is where maybe I should give a shout out to ATCO. ATCO provided all the books to speakers and has paid for the production of this book. And they are not an oil and gas company, but they are a gas transmission company, among many other, like to retail, to customers, among many other business interests. And they came at this from the perspective of systems are what's missing from innovation, systems thinking. And so they started from this perspective of, well, we're throwing spaghetti at a wall, listening to these pitches from these entrepreneurs. not convinced at all that they have a handle on the actual problem. And so they came at it from a commercial standpoint utterly. But what they've done is they've created a container called the Banff Systems Summit in partnership with MRU. And that has brought together people from multiple sectors in a conversation, not around sustainability or regenerative economics, as interesting and as worthwhile as those conversations are, but around systems, which is kind of neutral territory, right? Oh, everyone finds a way into systems. But in so doing, there's a sort of safe or brave space for people across many different sectoral and ideological divides to realize that either they're not working together and need to, or they're working on very similar challenges, uncannily similar, and, oh, let's figure out another way to work together. So that's not a complete answer to your question, but I think the solutions are not obvious, but the conversations are the obvious place to start.
Vanessa, do you have a brief response to that? And then I'll give Adam the final word before we break.
Quick one is that the answers to these questions depend on the context, right? So I would argue that it depends on the answer to the question of when are we? And for example, the answers would change the moment we have martial law south of the border, for example, right? So understanding that what we're living right now is really dependent on an arc of things, on a wave of things. So bringing the question of justice with the question of innovation as we stare at the possibility of our own extinction as humanity is very different from when you think about it still in that trajectory of economic growth in a finite planet is possible, right? So I would say trying to understand these questions and hold these questions at these different moments of the wave is extremely important right now.
Adam, do you have 1 minute of closing thoughts?
Well, first to say, I'm embarrassed in that I was using a word that was ambiguous, the whole, but I also showed in a very simple way what happens when we're in different, at that time, different understandings and things we could have had a fist fight had it gone. Yeah. Anyway, just to say that I have been working over and over and over in trying to understand the link between power, love, and justice, and inspired by two sentences in one of the final speeches of Martin Luther King Jr., where he said, "Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic." Then he goes on to say, "Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love." So I've spent 20 years trying to understand what that means and unpacking the definitions of those three words from Paul Tillich, the subject of King's doctoral dissertation. And I'm doing this because I think it's useful, including or particularly with Vinod's question. Power in this sense is us just trying to get stuff done, achieve our ambition, grow, do what we think is necessary. Love is the fact that we're part of something larger. And justice, in the sense Tillich makes it, or defines it, is the quality of the relationships amongst us, the quality and nature of the relationships amongst the different wholes, WHOLES. So I've been pursuing this and writing about it, and because I think this is the basic mathematics of working together across our scales and differences.
Thank you. And thank you all. I haven't been to this island in 20 years, and it's really special here. I've visited Machosen and the Highlands, and there's a different feel here than where I live in the Midwest US. People stop for bikes, and there's like this general pro-social feeling, and there's an abundance. Oh my gosh, the things you can grow here, and don't take it for granted. This island has opportunities that other places in the world might not. And I invite you all to change the initial conditions of the future. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Nate, Adam, James, Vanessa. And your books have been flashing up there intermittently. James, thank you, and ATCO for making all books available to all of our speakers. The other books you can order through the QR code out at the registration. And please don't forget to look up and start dialing into The Great Simplification. It is an extraordinary experience to follow Nate's thinking and the people he interviews, his own reflections. He's got his finger on the pulse of what we're doing here, and we look forward to future episodes and reflections. So thank you again, and we'll just take a moment. If you'd like to stand, breathe, turn around 3 times, and then turn around 3 times in the other directions, and sit down again. We'll get underway with our next panel. Well, we have an extraordinary gathering here on stage. Thinking about the words that Nate left us with about changing the initial conditions of the future, you can't really think about that without thinking about our education system and the ways that we're helping students, our young people, the next generation, to be supported in taking up the extraordinary challenges that they face in this time of rapid change and more. So I'm not going to do more than introduce my friend and mentor, Peter Senge. Peter is well known to many of you as one of the founders of the Society for Organizational Learning, the author of The Fifth Discipline, which is widely cited as one of the fundamental texts about management and strategy of the last 50 years. That was not that long ago. But Peter's extraordinary dedication to systems change has brought him to British Columbia. I'll let him describe that work with his partners and associates here. Peter, I'm going to turn this over to you at this point. So please welcome this wonderful panel and Peter Senge.
Thank you, Stephen. It is really a pleasure to be here in Victoria. I'm just introduce everybody and then we'll kind of get started. There's a kind of a sequence, to probably more or less reversed order of what we're seated here, but you'll see how we want to unfold this as we go. Immediately on my left is Jennifer McRae from the ministry. I never get your title right. I should read it up here. Associate Deputy Minister. Jennifer's been a key leader in this work for almost a decade now, along with the person sitting next to her, Sylvia Russell, who I first got to know as superintendent of one of the larger school districts in the province, Maple Ridge Pitt Meadows. And then on the duplex there, we tried to figure out who to put on that bench. And obviously it was the students. I understand there's one thing that's inaccurate. So Nishaya and Kagan. Nishaya is not an 11th grade student. She's a graduate. She's now in college. And I suspect Keegan, 11th grade is correct for you, right? Are you starting 11th grade now? Yes, okay, great. And then next to Keegan is Meryl. Yes, right order. Meryl Haida, one of the knowledge holders, and I guess about to be elder in the Nisga'a Nation. And next to Meryl is dear friend Charity Nuxmox, who's the high school principal. So this session, I think, will flow very easily from the last one. So after the kind of laying out of the challenges, dilemmas, and kind of fundamental requirements moving forward, hopefully we'll be kind of embodying the best we can and certainly illustrating what that looks like. So starting about a decade ago, building on a lot of wonderful work that had been occurring in the province of British Columbia for several decades prior. This is a a world-leading province in the domain of social emotional learning, recognized around the world for that. And as far as I know, the only place in the world that tracks the well-being of children, all children, in a population database from birth now. So there's no one in the world who can actually answer the question, how are the kids doing, the way BC can. And by the way, I've checked in Singapore. Not even Singapore can do it. And of course, that's a wonderful accomplishment, and it's very sobering because you can see that the children are actually not doing very well, despite the extraordinary efforts of the whole community, from pediatricians on through secondary educators, to actually work together better than probably people do any place in the world to tend to the well-being of children. To me, it's a poignant kind of data point. I'm not a big fan of data. I mean, having been around places like MIT my whole life, thinking, okay, great, data. But it is useful, of course, to be grounded. And there's an old saying in traditional Chinese culture that the mark of every golden age is that children are the most important members of society and teaching the most revered profession. By that standard, we don't do too well. But more to the point of where the last session brought us, okay, great. We know the depth, breadth, and there should be a good single English word for the daunting nature of our problems. But in the end, this is not about grand designs and big ideas rolled out through provinces and countries. It's about step by step by step moving into a different way of being. So what we'll be primarily doing during this session is kind of letting you all kind of look over the shoulder of a wonderful group of educators from the ministry to one particular community, really starting to step together in a different direction. One of the things that we were trying to do in putting this group together is illustrate the range of leadership, types of leadership. The word leadership, I've often thought, well, if we could just get rid of this word. It's so entwined with hierarchy and power, and the leaders are, you all know. And actually, it's a problem around the world. It transcends all the modern cultural contexts. This profound confusion with the leaders are the people at the top, whatever top you're talking about. Whereas the root of the English verb to lead literally means, you want to see it again? It literally means to step ahead. It has an Indo-European root, typically written lithe, and it literally means to step across the threshold. So in that sense, it's not about position at all. If you're in a position of authority, obviously your ability to step ahead really matters because you affect a lot of people. But if you're not in a position of authority, it doesn't mean that you're not a leader. The only organization, by the way, that I've ever worked with in depth that understood that, ironically, is the U.S. Army. We had a 10-year partnership with and I'm going to tell you, the military, the good military organization, they have a saying in the U.S. Army, your first day as a leader is your first day on the job. They take it very seriously. They think a lot about the difference between leadership at the very front levels to all the way up to generals. So leadership and hierarchy are not the same. It's very important to understand that. Until you start to understand that, you can't possibly have a ground for appreciating the types of change processes that are really possible, led by people in all kinds of different positions of authority. One of the reasons it's very important to end this morning flow with a session that had, sitting in the middle, two of the younger leaders in the Nisga'a Nation. The kids are the most important leaders for many of the most important issues. I can't tell you how many sustainability, regenerative economics, blah, blah, blah conferences I've been at, and there are no young people, zero. Like, what's wrong with this picture? So the basic flow today is I'm going to say just a few more comments just to contextualize, and then we'll go right into the experience of the people in the Nisga'a Nation. Now, I say that and pause because I'm suspecting there's a few people here like me as someone, citizen of the United States, aren't really aware. I don't think this is much the case in Canada, but certainly for the people from outside Canada, that it is possible legally in this country to recover full legal autonomy for an Indigenous community. It's a complex legal process. The Niska are referred to as the Niska Nation because you are a nation. The nation of Canada has to in some ways relate to the Niska Nation as they would relate to other nations outside. It was actually a stunning piece of work that went on through the 1980s by a team of lawyers who basically redesigned those parts of the Canadian Constitution. Oh, by the way, those lawyers were all Indigenous lawyers. I've happened to know quite a few of them. It is one of the more significant aspects of systems change. Now, what does it illustrate about systems change? It illustrates kind of what we all know. The artifacts matter, the laws, the policies, in an organizational setting, the metrics, the hierarchy, how we're organized. Those are aspects of the system. They're in some ways, the easier aspects of the system. I don't know if people like James Sagesh Henderson and Leroy Little Bear, who were part of that legal team, did the work, would agree, but I think they would. They could not have done this if there wasn't a sentiment. They could not have accomplished this redesign of the Canadian Constitution if there wasn't a rising sentiment in the country that something is really wrong. As Vanessa often says, we go on and on about human rights, but in many ways, all the real conversations start by acknowledging human wrongs. Real systems change always involves the tangible, like the laws, the legal procedures that enable the possibility of recovering full sovereignty for an Indigenous country, an Indigenous nation, and the mental models, the mindsets, the attitudes, the beliefs, the convictions, the assumptions, the kind of subtler aspects of what makes a social system a social system. It is, in the end, comprised of humans. And all that the humans bring in terms of their history, their beliefs, their convictions, their aspirations, and of course, in many cases, most importantly, their tacit assumptions. I remember asking Leroy and Sagesh when I learned that story 25 years ago, could that be done in the United States? Could anything like what you accomplished in Canada be done in the United States? They said no. The genocide was too far past, too successful. There's not enough to build on, and there's no shared sentiment, or at least sufficiently shared sentiment that something's really wrong here. So real systems change is always an inside job. Not only an inside job, but without really paying attention to that inner dimensions, nothing much really happens. So we had that kind of as a theme we wanted to weave throughout today. And I'm going to just pose a couple of questions. As Stephen said, these sessions seem to work best when we pose a couple of questions that everybody can relate to. In what ways is the inner work part of your work in whatever ways you're involved in systems change? In what ways is it not? Could be, but still yet obscured. The story or the example I just gave of why the US Constitution could not have been redesigned like the Canadian points to an absence of sense of real shared responsibility for wrongs. It's an example of a blind spot, you might say, or certainly a lack of a shared mental model that we really do have to change. So in that sense, system change is always an inside job. And not only an inside job. In the end, changing those laws and those legal procedures was really important. It's just that you can never bring about significant changes in what we often call the artifacts of the system, the tangible, manifest aspects of a system, without a critical mass of understanding at the subtle, personal, interpersonal, shared, cultural, whatever words you want to use there, the inner work. So that's the kind of core question we want to explore. In what ways is this entwined inner-outer dance at the heart of any real change, deep, long-term change? And why is it hard? What keeps us from seeing that? I doubt that little of what I've just said would strike many people as terribly controversial. We have a phrase in English, I suspect you have the same problem here in Canada, in the English-speaking Canada, of the quote, soft stuff, right? I see a few nods. It's a horrible phrase because it's really, that's the hard stuff, right? The tangible artifacts, in the end, you do need new metrics, and you get enough people together and you sort out new metrics, or you change the organization's formal structure. It's not easy, but yeah. But me, I'm part of what needs to change. How we are together is part of what really needs to change. There's always three fundamental levels of systemness or independence in any kind of social world. This system, if I were to translate literally the Chinese mind, heart, body system, this thing I call a self. This thing we call a group or a family or a school. The social reality. And then all the larger systems. Gregory Kahete, who's did a brilliant synthesis of tribals, traditions of education and development, said there's always three fundamental elements, at least he said, in every tribal system he ever studied. He's a Tewa Indian, so he's from what today would be called New Mexico in the Southwest. Land, individuation, this system, community, this system, and land, which stands for the living presence of all that's beyond we humans, and without which we humans really don't do too well. So, where's the inside job in all this? So, here's the way we're going to start. I'm going to just quickly ask each of them to introduce themselves, but we're going to go in an order where we're going to actually start with the Nisga'a people, because we want to kind of make the centerpiece of this, kind of looking over our shoulders, getting a sense of what's their journey been like in their process of using what we often call now the compassionate systems, tools, methods, framework, which is kind of a simple way to point at a whole bunch of tools and methods for deep, long-term, individual, collective change. And then we'll loop back at the end to the role of formal leadership, like Sylvia's experience as a district superintendent and coach and mentor of many other district superintendents here in the province, and Jen's as a senior level of the ministry. All these levels of authority really matter. That's the whole point of the composition here. So maybe just go down really quickly and just introduce yourself so people, and we've tried to sit so you can kind of more or less keep track.
Good morning, Jennifer McCrae. I am pleased to be on the lands of the Lekwungen-speaking people of the Songhees and Cossapsin First Nations and the Wasanich people, on whose lands I was born, raised, and continue to live today and work. I am a senior leader in the BC provincial government with the Ministry of Education and Childcare.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so pleased to be here with this team of students and very special adults from the Nisga'a School District and the Nisga'a Nation. I hope that Jen and I have very little to say today because these are incredibly interesting people who bring real richness to the work that we're trying to do in BC around compassionate systems and change in the public education and to some degree private education system in terms of how are we interacting with each other and the relational power that needs to exist in schools to make our system so much better. And I'm very optimistic about this and very inspired by this group of people and others that I've met in Nisga'a over the last several months.
I'm Ahith Lucasna, so good morning, everybody. Nisheaswa Ksim Gui Chimes Guam Niska Gilachdamixwil Witgui Gilachdamixwil Jugai. My name is Nishea. My Nishka name is Gui Chimes, meaning always shining, and I grew up in Nuayanch and I reside in New Ange.
Egan, Swat, Lusky, Eat, Will, Skidon, Will Widgeweet, Get Look Down, Switch, okay. My name's Keegan Cravel. I'm a grade 11 now. I play basketball. I'm from New Ange, British Columbia, and I'm happy to be here.
Hiluk as Nisop Hadash what Wamnisqa Merle Morvan Wam Amksiwa. I am from Wilps Wisnichbilk of the Giskas tribe, and I live and work on Nisqat territory in the Nisqat community of Gitlacht Amex. Diaksit Nisop.
Good day to everyone. Skok midam wil doyaks gam ligi hathal amasat gun gam guit wilt. We just want to first thank the Creator for such a beautiful day and for bringing us together. What a blessing. Noch smalks thwak simlach skik neat wilp squeak mat will wit quit. Doik sitness to the song He's in Esquimalt for allowing us the opportunity to share our way of being as we visit and share on your territory. My Nisgat name is Naxmachs. Machs means the white caps on the water. Nax means mother of. I am from Wilpsqueak Mount, and I am from the Eagle Clan. Doik Sitnissa.
Thank you. So we're going to start off by spending some time just really listening to what the journey has been like for our 4 guests from the Nisga'a Nation. And I think we're going to start off with Merle.
Hiluk again. It is my great honor to be here on the Songhees territory and in the presence of such great leadership, both here on the panel and here at the conference. I bring with me the wisdom of my late father, Watlan Samagit Mali, the late Joseph Grandison. Watlan Sigidum Nak Weetix Naks, the late Pauline Grandison, and that of my Nisga'a ancestors who've gone to what we call the happy hunting grounds. I have been working alongside this group for probably the last couple of years. I've attended Foundations for Systems Change with Peter. I'd like to acknowledge Charity for tapping me to be in this role. I never imagined that I would ever be in such a position as I am today. I'm kind of grateful for the lights that are shining in my eyes because I can't see all of you and it makes me a little less nervous. The systems change approach has really changed the way that I approach my life in general. It's changed the way I approach my job and the way that I raised my 18-year-old grandson. And my grandson has been the reason that I work for change within the education system. I have dealt with many administrations at the school and pushed for change specifically to the way that the students learn, because not all of them are book learners. Some of them, like me, are hands-on learners. And I commented to Charity at our last gathering in May or late April that the way the school is run is very different from the way it was run 40 years ago when I was in high school. The students have a voice now, and that is very refreshing to see. And to see two youth up here speaking to you like they're speaking to their mom and dad is very impressive. And I'm so proud of Keegan and Nashea for their strength to be able to do this. As a 17-year-old, I never would have been able to sit up here and speak to you as I am today. Peter indicated that I'm almost an elder. I'll be 60 years old in October. My name tag bumped me up to an elder. And that's a badge that I wear with pride. And I carry myself with the strength of my ancestors. And this work would not be possible if I didn't take care of myself first. And before we came out here, we had a prayer in the foyer just to get ourselves grounded, as understandably there was some nervousness and anxiety, which is to be understood. So we joined hands and said a prayer to ground ourselves and ask for good energy to surround us as we shared our words with you today. Taking care of self is very important in any aspect of your work or your life in general. And the way that I take care of myself is to go and have a quiet time by myself so I can keep myself grounded and picture a string through my body that is being pulled taut so that I can stand straight and speak with confidence. And it's something that I share indirectly with our youth representatives about how to speak in public. And I practice that a lot when, as a community, we present to a grieving family and we present a song. And I look up at the rafters in the church, and that's where I want my voice to go. And I think about my ancestors who've passed on, and I want them to hear me in heaven as well. So I try to speak with a strong enough voice that they can hear me. Just bear with me, I've got my notes on my phone here. I've been working with the Nisga'a language and culture for probably about the last 30 years. And I've implemented that into my work with systems change with Peter and Mena and Charity. And one of the foundations of our Nisga'a ways of being is Klachausansk, which means respect. And if we don't have respect of self, we cannot respect anyone else. So I remind myself of that every day. And compassionate systems, in compassion in the Nisga'a language is Qa'im Qat. And Qat is your heart. And it's something that I practice in my daily life. For example, I inherited my late mom's smokehouse. And so what I've started doing is I help members of the community who don't have access to a smokehouse to get them their winter supply of fish for their freezers or their jars or what have you. And I ask for nothing in return other than blessings for my freezer to always be full. That is something my mom role model to us as children. And it's why I continue to do that in her honor. I have some steelhead in the freezer at home that I was hoping to get long before I left home on Wednesday last week, but I didn't get them until Tuesday. So now they're in the freezer and I'm going to be in the smokehouse when I get home tomorrow. It has been quite the journey working with Jennifer, Peter, and Sylvia, and I feel so embraced by this group. There's a lot more of us, but I feel like they've become like my extended family when I'm away from home. And it's really comforting to have them here with me and with all of us to offer us support. And there was talk of energy, and energy to me, we are all made up of energy. And if you shake someone's hand and you feel that vibration, that's an exchange of energy. And we were out whale watching yesterday with our youth and Ms. Peel here. And the excitement when we seen the whales was just phenomenal, like the screams, and it was so exciting. And to be able to experience that with a group of youth was, to me, was a blessing. And I am so grateful for all the blessings that come into my life. And again, it's such an honor to be here, and I thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, ma'am. So, Nishaya and Keegan, want to say a few words about what the journey's been like for you?
I am an alumni of Nishka Secondary School, and being transparent, my high school experience was much better than like the middle school experience, because we had one set schedule and every day was kind of repetitive. And in my high school, we started a rotation schedule, and that happened because we communicated that to Miss Peel, and it was also really helpful during like online schooling days. And we also started these family meetings so we could communicate other questions and topics on areas we should change, what we should keep. And yeah, that was really exciting to see the engagement. And the rotation schedule is actually the biggest factor that made my high school career so enjoyable. And also the exploration days on Wednesday, because every day was just different. And basically these meetings consisted of like questions and discussions on how our school is structured. And after attending the workshop, Compassionate Systems, we were inspired and we brought the workshop to our community for our children, and the engagement was amazing to see. Also, I want to talk about how we applied this workshop to our school within our academics. I had a social justice class that I took that I had to take for a grad requirement, and being transparent, I didn't think I'd like it, but it was genuinely the best class I've ever taken. It was like compassionate systems applied into an academic course. I'll explain a bit more into that. We took the family meetings as an opportunity to engage in and discuss opportunities like on what we should consider doing in the school, and we created surveys and we handed those out. We also had a mini workshop, with 12 breakout groups, and that actually pushed us to discuss and engage with our peers, because that doesn't really happen often. And it was amazing to see the participation. And after all that amazing work, we had the opportunity to speak in the chambers of Nishkalasm's government. And we were giving very rewarding feedback on our work and dedication by our own Madam President Eva Clayton. The class actually had passion for our work, and it wasn't just a grad requirement. But one thing I would want to continue to see for years is our unity, especially through our language preservation from pre-K to high school and beyond. Last semester, a couple of my fellow students and I, we asked Ms. Peel if we could have Nishka language class again. And we received the news that next semester we would be enrolled in Wilpes Wilhosk Nishka Institute, a university level class focusing on Nishka language. And it was definitely university level. It was very difficult, but we all passed. There was 7 of us. We all passed with very high marks. And we were so lucky to get that knowledge shared with us in high school, especially at a university level. A connection that I made between our culture and compassionate systems awareness is that they're both rooted with compassion. And I know these changes in our school made such an impact, and especially through our culture. And Compassionate Systems has introduced me to so many amazing people and has taught me to have change, you have to build community. Thank you for listening to me.
Talk a bit about how I use systems awareness with basketball and at home in my daily life. It's like when you take basketball, you think about high level situations, like say you're in fourth quarter and you need to win the game and everyone's stressed out. I'm sorry. And I'd go back to like using different strategies in my mind to like calm myself down. And when I do that, it gets so much easier to play the game and feels like you can make a comeback against anyone. And when I'm using it at home and just out and about, it's like taking, give me a minute. It's like taking what you've experienced into learning something new, but I don't know, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, I think that's about it for me.
Charity, so you've been part of this journey for a long time. I'm kind of curious, your perspective as a principal, what has kind of evolved in the way you think about your job?
Yeah, I guess when I was sharing that when I became vice principal and then principal, it wasn't ever really my intent to become an administrator. I was really happy being a teacher, happy being in the classroom. And one of the reasons that I did step forward and take a step is because of the children. The children were encouraging me with curious questions about why is school this way and why are we seen this way? Why are we treated this way by those that are in leadership positions? And so because of those curious questions and because of that encouragement from children, I took a step and found myself in a space where I knew there were things missing. And I knew from my own experience, I knew from my own life and my own experience in the school, because I'm also an alumni, along with Nashaya, from our school, that there were missing pieces. The voices of the children definitely were missing, because that's what they were telling me already. And as I began my engagement with the work on myself and the work for myself, because as Merle said, it's about inner work, and it is about how do I show up. I knew the other missing piece was our elders, our knowledge keepers, our nation, our community. And it's coming up on 4 years that we've been gathering with elders, knowledge keepers, and myself, really to allow for an opportunity to have a conversation, to understand really truly what is happening at our school. And on our very first day together, elders, knowledge keepers, and myself, I had to facilitate some trust and some very hard ways of communicating. And I had to allow for truth to come forward, for everybody to just speak their truth on what they thought about the school, what they thought the school was doing, what they thought the school wasn't doing, and then to come to some understanding together so that we would be able to move forward with where do we want to be? What is our aspiration? How can we create that together? And it's amazing to me that we continue to come together, and our group is a group that is alive and living. And some people can make it sometimes, some people can make it other times, and we continue on. And it's the encouragement piece, encouragement not just for me, but the work that we're doing together. It's a collective encouragement. It's encouragement for themselves. And after that very first day, the elders and knowledge keepers said, "Thank you for opening the door." I think there was always an assumption that the door was open and that our elders and knowledge keepers were just not coming in. And so we had to create the space. And then I introduced them to the children so that the kids could tell the truth too. And so we continued on this and are continuing together. And a big piece of my work is about supporting the adults, supporting the teachers, the staff, because they're working with the kids every day, all day. And I need to also hear them. I need to know what they need as far as supports and what they need in order to thrive with the children. And so I introduced a time and space which I think turns out to be really for me and our elementary kids. We have about 98 elementary students. And so I get to spend 40 minutes every week with them, dancing and singing in our own language. And their teachers have the opportunity to collaborate and meet together so that they can offer them some experiential opportunities in the afternoon that allow our children out onto our land to learn about our culture, our history, and our ways by being out on our own territory. And that came from the secondary school as well, to offer some experiential, some outdoor learning, and ensuring that our kids are connected to our land, our history, our people. And that's where our family time came in. Some people call it flex time. We call it family time because we're a family. When I first became vice principal, most schools call it an assembly, and an assembly is much like this, where someone stands in the front and talks at you and then says, go away, do what I said, and I'll talk to you in 4 years, I guess is what the other panel said. But basically, right, I'll talk to you again in a while. Not check in with you, but I'll talk to you again. And so I called a family meeting, and everyone, the kids and the adults, were, what is she doing? She's always doing something, but what is she doing now? And so I said, this is a family meeting because we are a family. And I'm a community member. I'm a member of the Nisga'a Nation. And so at first, I will make a connection with everyone. How am I connected to every single one of you? I'm Laxgeek. My dad was Ganeta. And so the Ganeta, they are my Wilkselects. They're in charge of taking care of me and making sure, checking in with me, making sure that I have what I need. And that goes, even if they're children, that's still their role and responsibility. They're learning, right, over time. And then my dad's dad was Lakibu. And so Lakibu were in charge of taking care of my dad. And that's how he learned how to be a good person who is a good paternal relative. And my mom was originally from Cape Mudge, the Kwakwaka'wakw, and her original tribe before she was adopted into Laxgeek was Gisgast. And so I always say I have a special place for the Gisgast because that's where my mom's family was from. And so creating those connections and understandings, all of us need to know who our paternal relatives are. And so we're pretty unapologetic about, and I think it's part of my boldness, in living our culture in our school too, bringing it in every single way we can, using our language as much as we can. I had the opportunity to work with the grade 8s in February for 4 days. And as we were learning about our culture and our identity as Nisga'a, they kept saying, I don't know if you've heard 13-year-olds, but they constantly say, wait, what? Wait, what? They say it to each other and they say it to the adults a lot. And I always say to the kids, nope, say that in Nisga'a. And so I told the grade 8s, they're one of our smallest cohorts we've ever had, but I said to them, I'm going to buy you t-shirts that say that in Nisga'a because we learned how to say it. And so they didn't believe me because they're new to our school. They didn't believe me I was going to get them t-shirts. And I got them t-shirts. So everybody's walking around with these shirts that say, Yacha Winago. And so, and it is being unapologetic and using our language as best we can. And another example of that circle of communication, the elders, when I was asking them about our ceremony, when we're passing the Gatam Siwilyansk, the power and authority from the community to the leadership within the school, you know, how better can we strengthen that? And so what came out of that was a blanketing ceremony because that's what we do. And how about we also cleanse our school because we hadn't cleansed it in a really long time. And it's just, I guess, an ongoing and constant communication between myself, the adults, the kids, the elders, and the knowledge keepers, and trying to make sure that, you know, we consistently are listening to each other and getting a sense of, is what we're doing making a difference for kids? And if you listened to our children, it's amazing. Like, I almost cried how many times while Nashea was talking and Keegan was talking and Merle was talking, because it's come to a place where it's what we do, it's who we are. And that's amazing. Like, we took away bells. I was talking with Keegan, our boss, we call them the hashtag Boston 5 because they were the 5 kids that I took to Boston. And I was talking to them about after one of the sessions we were in, I said, do you guys remember bells at school? And then I think Nashea said, yeah, it had this really weird, and I said, yeah, I went boo, boo, like really loud. And so, and I was telling them, like, in one year, I think there were probably about 10 or 12 bells. And it was so frustrating as an adult. I was like, okay, I'm not sure how many people's jobs where the bell tells them to start and to stop and go for a break and then come off the break, and right? Like, and so I said, I'm not sure, like, I don't know if this is good for kids. And so we don't have bells. We haven't had bells for a really long time. I think in Keegan's career at our school, I don't think he's heard a bell. Our elementary students, they don't also have one of those old school bells anymore. We use a drum, and our kids are welcome to hit the drum and call everybody in. And so it's just, how do we look for those ways and constantly support people for what is it that they need, and how are we balancing and welcoming our new family members? Because as life goes, some of our family members leave, some come back, new ones come in. And as we've been taught over time, our previous leadership, and I think that's something that Merle also highlighted, was that tremendously strong and powerful voice and force of our ancestors, the ones that went before us, to constantly remind us our job. Our job is to ensure, first of all, paramount, that our kids are proud of who they are and where they come from as Nisga'a. And secondly, they are to have a comparable education to anywhere else in this province. And I would argue that currently, I think our kids are getting a better education than anywhere else in this province.
Thank you. The work going on in Nisga'a is not in any way unique. We wanted to kind of have one context to really step into deeply, but there are many like this. There are about 50 people now in the province, educators like Charity, who've gone through a year-long certification program, and many districts are kind of advancing in their own way, in their own ways that are coherent with their communities and their kids. Sylvia and Jen are kind of examples of the more senior leadership that's been helping set the stage for all this and supporting it. So maybe we'll kind of close for just hearing a few words from you about, so what's the journey been like for you, kind of rethinking what it means to be a superintendent of a big district or a senior person in the ministry?
I'm really pleased to be here and have you hear this story, because I think it's so, we are so ready for change in so many aspects of our society. And Peter mentioned the incredible database that we have out of Help UBC. Our 5-year-olds in this province are not doing very well. And the state of their social and emotional wellness is in decline. And I actually think this is a reversible situation, even though as a superintendent, I work super hard to think about those kids every day of the time that I spent in that job, along with the grade 4s who should be human Velcro. And 20% of our grade 4s tell us that there is no one in their school that cares about them or is important to them who is an adult. And so you listen to this story and you lay that data on top of it, and you begin to see why I think you would understand why I, as a superintendent, would think it was incredibly important to do that work internally with our adults who are expressing huge fatigue and anxiety and stress about the work that they're doing in schools, and children who are also expressing that worry and stress through these measures coming out of UBC. And so how do you change that? And what do you do to actually, as a system, a school system, as a provincial system, do things to make it so that children are not feeling that level of stress, so that parents are embraced as they come in our doors? And we have a lot of really fine people working in our schools, but it's the bringing together of this kind of collective sense of we have to be well within ourselves. We have to be centered. We have to be, Stuart Shanker said a number of years ago to all of us in the province that children have to be calm, alert, and ready to learn. Those words have always stuck with me. We have to create conditions like that in our schools for both our adults and our families and our children. So for me, this was kind of a daily thing that I would think about, like, how is it that 20% of our grade 4s are saying that? Why is it? Are we talking about that? Are we thinking about what are the skill sets that maybe we haven't uncovered in the school system yet that are going to lead to a healthier set of outcomes for all of us and a calmer, gentler, more connected school setting? And it's the reason why I thought it was really important to bring this group of very interesting people to this conference, because they can describe what those conditions look like. And they use in the school setting words like love and family and ancestors and spirituality. We've been allergic to those words. As a matter of fact, you know, people often feel like they could get disciplined for those words being used. And I remember being really startled one time when a secondary principal, who is now a fabulous superintendent in the province, said to his graduating class, "I love you." He'd opened the school with this class, and it was a heartfelt, true expression of how he had connected with this group of kids and the staff and the people that were in the auditorium that he was speaking to. And we have to stop, slow it down. People spoke about that a little bit today. We're so in a hurry to improve results. Results don't improve in schools until we actually know who the kids are. We put the right adults in front of them. We break apart structures that are just there because they're just there, like bells ringing, and we do some things differently. And I think Peter and Meta, through this compassionate systems awareness, have shown us some of the pieces that we need to put together to be thinking more deeply about that experience that we all have lived through of going to school and what we can do to make it more responsive to the times that we actually live in today.
I would add to Sylvia's comments a huge thank you to the NISCA for being so generous with your teachings today. Thank you. From a government lens, we are really good at making committees and studying things and delaying things. And quite honestly, we use the data from HELP telling us our kids were not doing well. We use the data of the adults who were not doing well. The attendance was low. It was costing the system. The constant change in the classroom with teachers on call coming in. And we had an opportunity in front of us. And it was my colleague, Danielle Carter-Sullivan, who's here with us today. And we have a mental health in school strategy for the province. It's not a program, it's a strategy. And it says we have to start taking care of the adults who take care of our kids. And when we did it, and we had the data in front of us, we said, we'll just write compassionate systems and leadership and self and classrooms and the educators into the plan. It wasn't a 4-year study. It went to cabinet, it got approved, and it's alive and well in our province today. Some of the things as we journeyed into this work is, if we're truly doing systems change, it can't be 2 of us from government going down to MIT to do this fancy training and come back and tell the province what to do. Government's really good at that. So what we did is we said, we're taking the system. We took Sylvia, we took the principals with us. What we didn't do was take the kids, and yet what we say is every single thing we do in education and childcare is centered on kids and families. We got it wrong. And Niska got it right. Just 2 other quick points, Peter, I really want to make. Compassionate systems leadership and reconciliation is not in conflict. It's an and. This work must be led by First Nations in our province if districts are entering into the work, and how they do it in a good way. And it is grounded in what we know in Indigenous ways of knowing and being, is how to show up as true, authentic humans in a compassionate way in a system that we love.
Thank you. By the way, we'll all be together this afternoon in one of the workshops, so we're kind of trying to just keep focused here on the story and the journey and not the tools and methods. I'm an engineer by training. None of this happens just because it's a good idea. There are a lot of practices, and this work has really been integrated by at all levels, from the ministry to the districts to individual communities like Niska. Since we're just about out of time, I'm just kind of curious to invite Keegan and Esha particularly. So you're sitting here listening to adults really do our best to reflect on the plight, the difficulties we face. They're not difficulties that the Niska face, they're difficulties that humans face. We have a way of living that doesn't seem to work too well. It produces a lot of wealth for a few people and not a lot of the opposite for a lot of people. It's obviously doing immense damage to the larger living systems, nature, which we all depend upon. I'm just kind of curious, as you've been sitting here taking all this in, which I'm sure doesn't surprise you at all, do you have any final kind of words or suggestions to we adults as to what do you think maybe would help us do it better? It's a big question. Take it anywhere you want.
One of the biggest things that helped the students was Miss Peel just having an open mind and an open heart. So I think that's like my answer for you.
So what would the basketball have to say to us?
I really don't know what to say.
I understand.
I think just when, like when Nisha said, having Miss Beal having an open heart, open mind, like it helps a lot of kids to like go to class, do some work, and be able to like still be themselves instead of like being like strictly stuck to doing one thing.
Thank you. Merle, I think it is in fact fitting to always let the elder or the elder to be lead us in closing in a good way.
I think as a former student and alumni of Niska Elementary School, having a group of adults rallying for you in the back, it must be so empowering for the students. I know it would have been for me if I were a student and this change was happening in the back. And it makes me wish I was 40 years younger and I could go back to school again. Kabishe.
So it is our scheduled lunch break now, which we will do straight away. I would like to thank all these folks here. This is a long-term journey. You're seeing a little snapshots of a journey that's really in many ways been decades here. And it's been a great honor to be part of it. And we wanted to close the morning with this group because I hope that we all start to say, where are the kids when we come together? If they're not here, they're not here. Okay, so thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you to our guests from Nishka. Thank you to Peter, who incidentally came here to took a day, 2 days out of an annual family vacation in Vermont, which is supposed to be sacrosanct. Flew all the way here, got in last night just in time to be here this morning and leaves first thing tomorrow morning. So thank you, Peter. And I hope I'm allowed to congratulate Jennifer and Sylvia on the launch of the new BC Center for Compassionate Systems Awareness. Invite you to join the workshop that Peter mentioned after lunch, but we look forward to wonderful things coming out of the center, and congratulations again. So thank you. So Peter was right, it's lunchtime, and we'd like you to think about where you're going at 1:45 when the parallel sessions begin. And for those of you who weren't here first thing this morning, we have got a makeup class in singing and playing the blues. The musicians last night weren't able to be heard. They've generously offered to come back at the end of the day. So following our closing session with Joe Clark, Rowan's Gentleman Sylvester, and the Indigenous Center for First Nations Governance, there will be a blues performance by two very special people at the end. So thank you again. Enjoy your lunch.